I came home 3 days early. My daughter was gone. My wife said she was at her grandma's place. She lied. There at 2 a.m., I found my 7-year-old granddaughter in the backyard standing in a hole crying. It was 4 degrees outside. I picked her up. She whispered, "Dad, don't look in the other hole." I looked. It was empty. And it was exactly my size. They were not planning a welcome home party. They were planning a funeral. Before I tell you how I buried them in their own lies, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you believe family betrayal cuts the deepest. My name is Franklin Jefferson. I am 69 years old. I spent 40 years in logistics moving heavy freight across this country. I know how to calculate weight. I know how to calculate distance. And I know when something is missing. I was supposed to be on a hunting trip in Montana for another 3 days. But the silence from my house bothered me. My wife Esther usually called me twice a day to complain about money or the neighbors. For 2 days, the phone was dead. I packed my gear and drove my Ford F-150 back to Seattle through the sleet. I pulled into my driveway at 2:14 a.m. The house was dark. Not the peaceful dark of a sleeping home, but the hollow dark of an abandoned warehouse. I killed the engine and let the truck roll the last 20 yards. Tires crunched on gravel. I sat there for a moment listening to the engine tick as it cooled. My breath fogged the windshield. I looked at the front porch. The motion sensor light did not turn on. That was the first red flag. I changed that bulb 2 weeks ago. Someone had unscrewed it. I did not go to the front door. I reached into the glove box and took out my Colt 1911. I checked the chamber. Loaded. I stepped out of the truck and the cold hit me like a hammer. The wind coming off the sound cut right through my flannel jacket. I walked around the side of the house, keeping to the shadows of the cedar trees. I know every inch of this property. I bought it with cash 30 years ago when people said this neighborhood was a swamp. Now it is worth millions. And that land value is the reason I was holding a gun in my own driveway. I reached the backyard gate. It was unlatched. It swung slightly in the wind, hitting the fence post with a rhythmic metal clink. I pushed it open. The snow in the yard was disturbed. I shined my tactical flashlight at the ground. There were footprints, heavy boot prints, size 12, expensive tread. That was Caleb, my son-in-law. And next to them were drag marks. Small lines in the snow like someone had pulled a heavy sack. My stomach turned over. I followed the tracks toward the edge of the woods where the old oak tree stood. The wind died down for a second and I heard it. A sound that does not belong in a civilized home. It was the sound of a shovel hitting a rock. Clang. Pause, clang, then silence. I turned off my light and moved forward. I moved with the silence I learned hunting elk in the Cascades. I saw the mounds of fresh earth before I saw the holes. The dark clay contrasted sharply against the white snow. It looked like an open wound on the earth. I got closer. I saw a small head pop up from the ground. It was Mia, my granddaughter. She was standing in a pit about 3 feet deep. She was wearing her thin pink pajamas. Her skin was the color of gray ash. She was not moving. She was just staring at the dirt wall in front of her. Rage is hot, but what I felt then was cold. Absolute zero. I holstered my pistol and jumped into the hole. My boots sank into the freezing mud. Mia did not scream when I touched her. She was too cold to scream. Her body was rigid. I pulled her against my chest inside my jacket. She felt like a block of ice. I rubbed her back, trying to generate friction. Her teeth were not chattering anymore, which was a bad sign. Hypothermia had set in. I put my mouth close to her ear. "Mia, it is Grandpa. I am here." She blinked slowly. Her eyes were glassy. She looked at me, but she did not seem to recognize me at first. Then her small hand gripped my collar. It was a weak grip. "Grandpa, I am getting you out of here, baby girl." She tightened her grip. She pulled my head down. Her voice was a cracked whisper like dry leaves. "Don't look. Don't look at what Mia, the other hole. Daddy said the other hole is for the big trash." I looked over the edge of the pit we were standing in. 3 feet away, there was a second excavation. It was longer, deeper. I climbed out with Mia in my arms and shone my light into it. It was 6 feet long, 3 feet wide, 6 feet deep. It was precise. It was professional. It was a grave. And it was not for trash. It was for a man of my height and weight. I looked at the house. The master bedroom window was dark. Caleb and Esther were inside sleeping in the warmth while my granddaughter froze to death as part of some twisted punishment or leverage. They thought I was 1,000 miles away. They thought they had time to finish the job tomorrow night. They were wrong. I did not run to the house to confront them. That is what a foolish man does. A foolish man kicks down the door and yells and gets shot by a panicked coward. I am not a foolish man. I am a logistics manager. I manage variables. And right now, the variable was survival. I carried Mia toward the detached garage. It sits 50 yards from the main house. To the naked eye, it is just a workshop where I fix lawnmowers and store lumber. But underneath the concrete slab is my life's work. I punched the code into the keypad hidden behind the tool rack. The hydraulic hiss was barely audible as a section of the floor slid back. Steps led down into darkness. I took her down. The air in the bunker was recycled and warm. It smelled of gun oil and canned peaches. I laid Mia on the cot. I stripped off her wet pajamas and wrapped her in 3 layers of wool blankets. I turned on the electric heater and placed it near the bed. I checked her pulse. It was slow but steady. I found the medical kit and took out a glucose gel pack. I rubbed it on her gums. Her eyes fluttered. "Grandpa, Daddy is bad." "I know, baby. Sleep now." Grandma watched. She just watched. I stopped moving. My hand hovered over the blankets. Esther watched. My wife of 40 years watched her grandchild freeze in a pit. I felt something snap inside my chest. It was the last thread of loyalty I had for that woman. It severed clean. I stood up. I walked to the gun safe at the far end of the bunker. I spun the dial. The heavy steel door swung open. I did not reach for the hunting rifles. I reached for the Remington 870 tactical shotgun. The black matte finish drank the light. I sat on the bench and began to load it. 1 shell, 2 shells. The sound of the shells sliding into the tube was the only sound in the room. Red, green, gold. I counted them. 7 rounds of buckshot. I pumped the action. Clack, clack. A round chambered. I looked at the monitors on the wall. I had installed hidden cameras in the main house 5 years ago, not because I suspected murder, but because I did not trust banks and kept cash in the walls. Now those cameras were my eyes. I saw the kitchen. Empty. I saw the living room. Empty. I saw the hallway leading to the bedrooms. I could go up there now. I could end it in 5 minutes. But that would be too easy. They wanted to put me in a hole. They wanted to erase me. They wanted my land and my money, and they were willing to sacrifice a child to get it. Death was too quick for people like that. They needed to feel the fear first. They needed to know what it feels like to lose the ground beneath their feet. I sat back in the chair and watched the monitors. I checked my watch. It was 3 a.m. The sun would rise in 4 hours. That is when the game would start. I poured myself a cup of water from the jug. My hand was steady. I was not shaking. I was working. I waited. The hunter does not chase the prey. The hunter waits for the prey to step into the trap, and my house was about to become the biggest trap in Seattle. I leaned forward and whispered to the empty room. "You dug 2 holes, Caleb. You should have dug 3. 1 for you, 1 for Esther, and 1 for the mistake you just made." I turned off the main lights in the bunker, leaving only the glow of the monitors. On the screen, I saw a light turn on in the kitchen. Esther walked into the frame. She was wearing a silk robe I bought her for our anniversary. She opened the fridge and poured a glass of wine. She looked out the window toward the backyard. She could not see me, but I could see every line of betrayal on her face. She took a sip and smiled. It was a smile of relief. She thought she had won. "Enjoy the wine, Esther. It will be your last glass in this house." I checked Mia again. Her color was returning. Her breathing was deep and rhythmic. She was safe. Now I had to secure the perimeter. I went to the main control panel of the bunker. I had wired the house with a smart system years ago. Lights, locks, temperature, gas. I controlled it all from this basement. They thought they lived in a house. They did not. They lived in a machine, and I was the operator. I reached out and disabled the outgoing landline. I jammed the Wi-Fi signal. I isolated them. When they woke up, they would be on an island, and the tide was coming in. I sat there in the dark with my shotgun across my lap. I closed my eyes for a second and pictured the hole again. 6 feet deep. Exact dimensions. Caleb was a lazy man. He never did manual labor in his life. Digging that hole must have taken him hours. He must have been sweating in the cold. He must have been cursing my name with every shovelful of dirt. He wanted me dead so bad he was willing to blister his hands. That kind of hate does not happen overnight. That is a hate that grows like black mold behind the drywall. I had been blind. I thought I was providing for my family. I thought the money and the big house and the cars were buying their love, but I was just buying their patience. And now their patience had run out. My eyes snapped open. On the monitor, Caleb walked into the kitchen. He hugged Esther from behind. He kissed her neck. He pointed to the backyard and laughed. A belly laugh. He pantomimed shooting a gun. He was reenacting how he was going to kill me. Esther laughed with him. She swatted his arm playfully. I watched them. I memorized their movements. I memorized their joy. It was important to remember this moment, because when I was done with them, they would never smile again. I racked the shotgun one more time just to hear the sound. Welcome home, Frank. I waited until the digital clock on the bunker wall read exactly 7 in the morning. Upstairs, the floorboards creaked. The house was waking up. I stood in front of the small mirror in the basement bathroom. I washed my face with cold water. I looked at my reflection. The eyes staring back were not the eyes of a grandfather. They were the eyes of a man inspecting a shipment of broken goods. I practiced my smile. It was a tight grimace, but it would have to do. I needed them to believe I was just a tired old man happy to be home. I needed them to believe their plan was still salvageable. I put on my flannel shirt and walked up the hidden stairs. I emerged into the garage and unlocked the side door to the kitchen. The smell hit me first. Bacon and strong coffee. It was the smell of a normal American morning. It was a lie. I walked into the kitchen. My boots were heavy on the hardwood floor. Step, step, step. Esther was standing by the stove flipping pancakes. Caleb was sitting at the island reading a tablet. He was wearing a cashmere sweater that cost more than my first car. I cleared my throat. The sound was not loud, but in that quiet kitchen, it sounded like a gunshot. Esther spun around. The spatula flew out of her hand. It clattered onto the floor, spraying batter across the pristine white tiles. Caleb jerked so hard his knee hit the granite counter. His coffee cup rattled in its saucer. The look on their faces was not surprise. It was terror. It was the look of two people seeing a dead man walking. Honey, I am home early. I walked over to Esther. She was frozen. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish on a dock. I leaned in and kissed her cheek. Her skin was cold and clammy. She smelled of expensive perfume and nervous sweat. She did not kiss me back. She did not hug me. She stood there stiff as a board. Frank, you are here. Her voice was an octave too high. It cracked. I am here. The storm was coming in fast. I decided to beat the snow. I drove all night. I turned to Caleb. He had recovered slightly. He forced a smile onto his face. It was a shark smile, all teeth and no warmth. Frank, good to see you. We did not expect you until Tuesday. I know. I wanted to surprise you. I pulled out the chair at the head of the table. My chair. The leather creaked as I sat down. I placed my hands on the table. They were rough hands, working hands. They contrasted sharply with the smooth marble surface. I looked at the empty chairs where my daughter and granddaughter should have been. The silence in the room stretched thin. It was a rubber band waiting to snap. Caleb picked up his tablet, but his eyes were darting around the room. Esther bent down to pick up the spatula. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to try twice. I looked at the pancakes burning on the griddle. Something is burning Esther. She jumped. She turned off the stove. She put a plate in front of me. It was empty. She forgot the food. She was falling apart. I decided to push the first domino. Where are my girls? I expected to see Mia running down the stairs. I have a present for her in the truck. Esther turned her back to me. She pretended to wash a pan in the sink. She needed a moment to compose her face. Caleb answered for her. They are in Vermont, Frank. They went to visit my mother. Vermont. That is a long drive. They flew. They left yesterday morning. I cut a piece of the bacon Esther finally placed on my plate. I chewed it slowly. It tasted like ash. I swallowed. I looked Caleb directly in the eyes. His pupils were dilated. He was lying, and he was bad at it. That is strange, Caleb. I listened to the radio on the drive down. SeaTac Airport canceled all outgoing flights to the East Coast yesterday morning due to the blizzard. Nothing took off after 8 a.m. Caleb blinked. He looked at Esther for help. Esther turned off the water. She wiped her hands on a towel. She turned around. Her face was composed now. The mask was back in place. Oh, Frank, you know how Caleb gets the details mixed up. They did not fly. They drove. Zoe wanted to take a road trip. She thought it would be fun for Mia. I nodded slowly. I took a sip of orange juice. The acid burned my throat. They drove. In this weather. Zoe is terrified of driving in the snow, Esther. You know that. She panics if there is a quarter-inch of frost on the windshield. She wanted to be brave, Frank. She took the big SUV. It has four-wheel drive. I put my glass down. I made sure it made a solid thud on the table. That is even stranger. Because when I pulled in at 2 a.m., I walked past the garage window. The SUV is parked in its usual spot. I saw the license plate. Unless Zoe bought a second identical car and hid it from me, she did not drive the SUV. The room went deadly silent. The refrigerator hummed. The wind howled outside. Esther gripped the edge of the counter until her knuckles turned white. She was trapped. She had spun a web of lies, but she forgot that I count the threads. I watched the panic rise in her throat. She looked at Caleb. She was begging him to fix it. This was their dynamic. She created the mess, and he was supposed to clean it up. Caleb cleared his throat. He put the tablet down. He leaned forward. He tried to use his salesman voice, the voice he used to sell bad houses to good people. You are right, Frank. I am sorry. My head is all over the place this morning. They did not take the SUV. I rented a car for them. A brand new Explorer, top of the line, better safety features. I did not want them driving your old car. I stared at him. I did not blink. I let the silence hang there for 5 seconds, 10 seconds. I wanted him to hear his own heartbeat. A rental. I see. That explains it. I went back to eating my bacon. I let them exhale. I let them think they had maneuvered out of the trap. I saw Caleb's shoulders drop an inch. I saw Esther take a breath. They thought I was a senile old man who could be confused with fast talk. They did not know I had the rental receipts for this household sent to my secure email. There was no rental. But I was not ready to close the steel jaws yet. I needed them comfortable. So when are they coming back? Sunday, maybe Monday. Good, that gives us time to catch up. Just the three of us. I finished my breakfast. I pushed the plate away. I looked at the coffee pot. It was on the counter next to Caleb. Pour me a cup of coffee, Caleb. Black. No sugar. Caleb stood up. He grabbed the pot. He walked over to my end of the table. As he poured the dark liquid into my mug, his hand shook slightly. A few drops splashed onto the white tablecloth. Whoa there, son. You are trembling. Too much caffeine or a guilty conscience. It was a joke, Frank. Just a joke. I laughed. A dry, rasping sound. Caleb forced a laugh, too. He put the pot down and reached for the sugar bowl automatically. I said, Black Caleb, you forget things easily today. I reached out and grabbed his wrist. I have big hands. Hands that have loaded crates and fixed engines for 40 years. My fingers wrapped all the way around his forearm. I squeezed. Not enough to break bone, but enough to let him know that the old man still had iron in his blood. He tried to pull away. I held him fast. Wait, what is that? I pulled his hand closer to my face. I inspected his fingernails. Caleb was a man who got a manicure every Friday. He prided himself on his soft hands, but today his hands were not soft. Underneath the manicured edge of his index and middle finger there was dirt, not just garden soil. It was a thick, reddish clay, wet and heavy. You have been working hard, Caleb. I looked up at him. Our faces were inches apart. I could see the sweat beading on his upper lip. I was gardening, late last night. The wind knocked over some pots. I had to repot the hydrangeas. I looked back at his nails. I used my thumb to scrape a piece of the red clay. I rubbed it between my fingers. It was gritty. That is interesting, because the topsoil in our garden is black potting mix. I bought it myself last spring. This is red clay. Dense. Sticky. You only find this kind of clay deep down, about 4 or 5 feet down. I tightened my grip on his wrist. I felt his pulse hammering against my thumb. Boom, boom, boom. It was the rhythm of a frightened rabbit. You must have been digging very deep to fix a hydrangea, Caleb. Esther dropped a spoon in the sink. Clang. Frank let him go. You are hurting him. I looked at Esther, then I looked back at Caleb. I smiled. I am just admiring his dedication, Esther. It takes a lot of effort to dig that deep in the frozen ground, especially in the dark. I released his wrist. Caleb stumbled back a step. He rubbed his arm. He looked at the red smear on my thumb. He knew that I knew. But he could not admit it. If he admitted it, the game was over. So he stayed silent. He swallowed his fear. I stood up. I wiped the red clay onto the white tablecloth. It left a stain that looked like dried blood. Thanks for breakfast. I am going to take a shower. The drive was long, and I feel dirty. I walked out of the kitchen. I did not look back. I felt their eyes boring into my back. I knew exactly what they would do the moment I turned the corner. They would whisper. They would panic. They would plan how to accelerate the timeline. They would try to kill me before lunch. I walked up the stairs to the second floor, but I did not go to the bathroom. I went straight to the guest room window that overlooked the backyard. I cracked the blinds. Down below, the kitchen door opened. Caleb ran out into the snow. He was heading for the woods. He was going to check the hole. He wanted to see if the grave was still waiting for me. Run, Caleb. Run fast, because the ground you are standing on is about to open up and swallow you whole. I locked the bathroom door and turned on the shower. I let the water run hot until steam filled the small room. It was a decoy. I needed them to think I was washing away the road grime. I needed them to think I was naked and vulnerable. But I was fully clothed and moving with purpose. I opened the ventilation grate near the floor. It was a tight squeeze, but I had built this house with escape routes in mind. I slid the false panel aside and dropped into the crawl space that ran between the walls. It was dark and smelled of cedar wood and insulation. I crawled 10 feet to the east and dropped down into my office. This room was my sanctuary. It was soundproofed. The door was reinforced steel. And more importantly, it housed the server for the entire property. Caleb thought he was smart. He thought deleting a file on the app was the end of it. He did not know that the system had a hard backup that wrote to a separate drive every hour. I sat down at my desk. The leather chair was cold. I woke up the monitors. The blue light washed over my face. I cracked my knuckles and began to type. I pulled up the security logs for the last 72 hours. I wanted to see the moment my daughter left. I wanted to see the car she took. I wanted to see if she was crying. I navigated to the date she supposedly left. The screen flickered. Data corrupted. File missing. I tried the next hour. File missing. I tried the entire day. File missing. I sat back. My heart rate slowed down, which happens when I get angry. This was not a glitch. A glitch leaves fragments. A glitch is messy. This was a wipe. Someone had accessed the main admin panel and formatted the drive for exactly the last 3 days. The timeline was surgically removed. From the moment I left for my hunting trip until the moment I pulled into the driveway, the house had been blind. I looked at the access logs. There was a login using the admin password. The password was my birthday. I had written it down in a notebook I kept in the kitchen drawer. Caleb. He was too lazy to hack the system, so he just stole the key. He did not just want to hide a body. He wanted to erase history. He wanted to create a black hole where my family used to be. If there is no footage of them leaving and no footage of them staying, then he can spin any story he wants to the police. He can say they went for a walk and never came back. He can say they were kidnapped. He can say anything because the truth was deleted. But he made a mistake. He always makes mistakes because he is arrogant. He wiped the video, but he forgot the metadata logs. The system still recorded when a door sensor was tripped, even if the camera didn't save the video. I scrolled through the text logs. Tuesday, 11 p.m. Basement door opened. Tuesday, 11:45 p.m. Basement door closed. Wednesday, 9 a.m. Attic door sensor triggered. My breath caught in my throat. The attic. We never go to the attic. It is dusty and full of old holiday decorations. Why would the sensor trigger on a Wednesday morning? Unless they were moving something heavy, or someone. I printed the logs. I folded the paper and put it in my pocket. I had the digital ghost. Now I needed the physical proof. I checked the monitors. Caleb was still outside near the woods, pacing back and forth. Esther was in the kitchen, aggressively scrubbing a pot that was already clean. The hallway was clear. I climbed back through the crawl space and exited into the master bedroom closet. I waited for a moment, listening. The house was silent except for the distant hum of the refrigerator. I stepped out into the bedroom. This used to be my room. Now it was the guest room where I slept when my back hurt, but Caleb and Esther had taken it over while I was gone. Their smell was everywhere. Stale cigarette smoke and cheap vanilla air freshener trying to cover it up. I moved to the dresser. Caleb's clothes were thrown everywhere. He had no respect for order. I ignored his mess. I was looking for something specific. I scanned the room. My eyes landed on the bottom drawer of the nightstand. It was slightly ajar. I pulled it open. Hidden under a stack of glossy real estate magazines was a leather purse. It was worn at the corners. It was a Coach bag I bought for Zoe 5 years ago. She loved this bag. She carried it everywhere. She said it was her lucky charm. I picked it up. It felt heavy. I opened it. Inside was her wallet. I flipped it open. Her driver's license was there. Her credit cards were there. Her insurance card was there. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. No woman goes on a road trip across the country and leaves her license and money behind. It is impossible. But then I found something worse. In the side pocket of the purse was a small orange prescription bottle. I took it out. I read the label. Beta blockers. Zoe had a heart condition. She developed it after giving birth to Mia. She needed these pills twice a day. If she missed a dose, she would get dizzy. If she missed 3 doses, she could go into cardiac arrest. I checked the date on the bottle. She had refilled it 4 days ago. It was full. She had not taken a single pill since I left. They lied about the trip. They lied about the car. But this was not just a lie. This was a death sentence. By keeping her from her medication, they were killing her slowly. They did not need a gun or a knife. They just needed time. And they were buying time with every smile and every cup of coffee they poured me. I put the bottle in my pocket. My hand was shaking now. Not from fear, but from the urge to go downstairs and wrap my hands around Caleb's throat until his eyes popped out. But I could not do that. Not yet. I needed to know the endgame. I needed to know why today. Why did they have to do it now? I looked around the room again. I needed to find the motive, the real motive. Greed is a powerful motivator, but it usually requires a trigger. I looked at Caleb's briefcase sitting on the chair. It was a designer leather bag that looked like it had never seen a day of work. I popped the latches. They were not locked. Inside were the usual papers. Foreclosure notices on properties he tried to flip. Gambling slips from a casino in Vegas. Final notices from credit card companies. He was drowning. He owed money to everyone. But at the bottom of the stack was a notepad, a yellow legal pad with scribbles in black ink. I recognized the handwriting. It was jagged and rushed. It was Caleb's frantic math. He was trying to calculate his way out of ruin. I saw my name. Frank. Next to it was a number, $2 million. I saw the word life insurance. I saw the word accidental. And then I saw the phrase that made my blood freeze. Fall downstairs. Neck break. Immediate payout. I stared at the words. He had underlined them 3 times. This was not a vague plan. This was a script. He had researched the policy I took out 10 years ago. It had a double indemnity clause for accidental death in the primary residence. If I died of a heart attack, he got nothing. If I died in a car crash, he got half. But if I fell down the stairs in my own home and broke my neck, he got the jackpot. I looked at the diagram he had drawn next to the text. It was a crude drawing of my staircase, the staircase I built with my own hands. He had marked the 3rd step from the top with an X. Loose carpet, tripwire, push. He had options. He was not sure which one to use yet, but he was sure of the result. He was going to wait until I was at the top of the stairs. Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow morning. He would give me a little shove. Gravity would do the rest. He would call 911 crying. He would say I slipped. He would say I was old and clumsy. And he would collect the check before my body was cold. I tore the page off the notepad. I folded it and put it with the pill bottle. I had the motive, I had the method, and I had the weapon. I closed the briefcase. I made sure the latches clicked softly. I smoothed out the bedspread where I had sat. I backed out of the room. I walked to the top of the stairs. I looked down. The staircase was steep, hardwood steps, polished to a shine. A fall from here would shatter a hip at best and snap a spine at worst. I gripped the banister. It was solid oak. Caleb thought the stairs were his weapon. He thought he could use gravity against me. But he forgot one thing. I built these stairs. I know which board creaks. I know which rail is loose. And I know how to keep my balance when the world is tilting. I heard the front door open downstairs. Caleb was coming back in. He was stomping the snow off his boots. "Honey, is he still in the shower?" Caleb yelled to Esther. "Yes, I hear the water running." "Good." I checked the yard. "The hole is hidden. We just need to get him to the stairs tonight." I stood there in the shadows at the top of the landing. I looked down at the top of his head. I touched the paper in my pocket. "You want me on the stairs, Caleb?" You will get your wish, but you are not going to like who lands at the bottom. I turned and walked back to the bathroom. I undressed quickly and stepped into the shower. The water was scalding hot. I let it burn my skin. I needed to wash off the filth of their betrayal. I needed to be clean for what I had to do next, because tonight the stairs were going to be slippery, and only one of us was walking away. I dried myself off and put on my work clothes. I chose my dark denim shirt and the canvas trousers I use for timber work. I was not dressing for dinner. I was dressing for war. I slipped the orange pill bottle and the folded note into my pocket. I checked the hallway. Empty. Caleb had come back inside and was likely in the kitchen rehearsing his lines for the evening. Esther would be pacing the living room. They were distracted by their own anxiety. I moved to the third floor. The stairs up to the converted attic were narrow. I stayed on the edges of the steps where the wood is supported by the stringers. No squeaks, no noise. At the top of the landing stood a heavy door. This used to be a simple storage space where we kept Christmas ornaments and old tax records. 6 months ago, Caleb asked if he could renovate it. He said he needed a quiet space for his trading calls. He said he needed soundproofing to focus. I looked at the door now. It was a solid core steel door, reinforced with a frame that belonged in a bank vault, not a suburban home. He did not build an office. He built a cell. And right now, the only thing standing between me and my daughter was a biometric smart lock. It was a sleek black panel with a fingerprint scanner and a keypad. The little light on it pulsed red. Locked. Caleb was a man of the digital age. He believed that if something had a circuit board and a password, it was impenetrable. He forgot that every digital lock controls a mechanical bolt, and every mechanical bolt can be manipulated if you know where the tension points are. I did not have his fingerprint. I did not have the code. But I had a thin strip of high-tensile steel I kept in my wallet. It was a shim I made myself from a feeler gauge. I knelt down. I did not try to hack the computer. I attacked the gap between the door and the frame. I slid the metal strip in. I felt for the solenoid. It is a small magnetic coil that holds the locking pin in place. Caleb bought the expensive lock, but he installed it on a wooden frame. That was his mistake. Wood compresses. Steel does not. I pressed my shoulder against the door to apply pressure to the bolt. I worked the shim. I felt the spring give way. It was a subtle click, a sound so small it was swallowed by the hum of the central heating. The red light was still on. The computer thought the door was locked, but the bolt had slid back. I turned the handle. The door opened. I stepped inside and closed it behind me immediately. The silence hit me first. The room was lined with acoustic foam pyramids, black and gray. It sucked the sound out of the air. You could scream in here until your throat bled, and no one in the master bedroom below would hear a whisper. It was disorienting. It felt like stepping into a vacuum. In the center of the room was a heavy wooden chair bolted to the floor, and sitting in it was Zoe. My daughter looked small. She was wearing the same clothes she had on 3 days ago. Her gray sweater was stained. Her hair was matted. Her wrists were zip-tied to the armrests. Her ankles were taped to the legs of the chair. A strip of silver duct tape covered her mouth. Her head was hanging low. Her chin touched her chest. I moved toward her. My boots made no sound on the carpeted floor. I reached out and touched her shoulder. Zoe. She jerked violently. Her eyes flew open. They were wide with terror. She made a muffled sound behind the tape. She thrashed against the restraints. She thought I was Caleb coming back to finish her off. She thought this was the end. It is me. It is Dad. She froze. She looked up at me. Her eyes scanned my face. She saw the scar on my chin. She saw the gray in my beard. Recognition flooded in. Then the tears came. They did not flow gently. They exploded. Her chest heaved. She tried to speak, but the tape held fast. I pulled out my pocket knife. I did not cut the zip ties yet. I carefully peeled the tape from the corner of her mouth. It ripped away some skin, but she did not flinch. She gasped for air. It was a desperate, ragged intake of breath. Dad. Oh, God. Dad, you are here. I am here, baby. Keep your voice down. She shook her head frantically. It does not matter, Dad. The room is soundproof. He tested it. He fired a starter pistol in here yesterday, and Esther did not even look up from her magazine downstairs. I poured water from a plastic bottle on the desk into her mouth. She drank greedily. She choked and coughed, but kept drinking. She was dehydrated. I wiped her chin with my thumb. Why, Zoe? Tell me everything. I need to know why they are doing this. I know about the money, but this is beyond greed. This is madness. Zoe leaned her head back against the chair. She looked exhausted. She looked 10 years older than 32. It is not just money, Dad. It is leverage. Caleb did not just lose our savings. He lost everything. He started trading on margin 6 months ago. He thought he was a genius. He thought crypto was going to make him a billionaire. He leveraged the house. He leveraged my savings. He leveraged everything. I listened. My face was stone, but my insides were burning. I knew he was a gambler, but I did not know he had bet the farm. How much, Zoe? She closed her eyes. $5 million. The number hung in the silent air. 5 million. That was not just bad luck, that was catastrophic stupidity. But that is not the worst part, Dad. When the market crashed last week, he tried to win it back. He borrowed money. Not from a bank. No bank would touch him. He went to a private lending group in the city, the kind of people who do not ask for credit scores. They ask for collateral in blood. The Russians. I did not ask it as a question. I stated it. I knew the type. Yes. He owes them $2 million by tomorrow morning. If he does not pay, they told him they would take Mia. They showed him photos of her at school. They showed him photos of you at the hunting lodge. I gripped the back of the chair. My knuckles turned white. They had been watching us. Caleb had brought wolves to my doorstep. He panicked Dad. He told them he had an inheritance coming. He told them you were sick. He told them you were going to sign the land over to him before you died. They gave him a deadline, midnight tonight. If he does not have the deed or the insurance payout by midnight, they are coming for us. So that is the plan. I fall down the stairs, or I sign the paper. Either way, he gets the money to pay the sharks. Zoe nodded. Tears streamed down her face again. He is insane, Dad. He has not slept in 4 days. He keeps taking pills. He thinks he is saving the family. He thinks if he sacrifices you, he can save me and Mia and we can start over. He told me he is doing this for love. Can you believe that? He sat right there where you are standing and told me he was going to kill my father to save my future. And your mother. Does she know about the sharks? Zoe laughed bitterly. Mom knows. Mom does not care about the sharks. Caleb promised her $1 million from the insurance. She wants to leave Dad. She has a boyfriend in Miami. She has been planning this for a year. She sees you as an obstacle. She calls you the gatekeeper. She says you are holding her hostage in a life she hates. When Caleb came up with the plan, she did not even hesitate. She helped him tape my legs. She helped him dig the hole. I looked at the wall. I looked at the black foam pyramids. My wife. The woman I built this house for, the woman I sat next to in church every Sunday. She was not a victim. She was a co-conspirator. She held the shovel. I looked back at Zoe. She was trembling. Dad, please. You have to cut me loose. We have to get Mia and run. We can take your truck. We can go to the police station. Please cut the ties. My hands are numb. I looked at the plastic zip ties digging into her wrists. Her skin was purple around the edges. I looked at her pleading eyes. Every instinct in my body screamed to cut her free. I wanted to carry her out of this room. I wanted to wrap her in blankets and drive her far away. But I am a logistics manager. I know that if you move the cargo before the route is secure, you lose everything. If I cut her loose, we have to walk out that door. We have to go down 2 flights of stairs. Caleb is armed. He has a gun in his waistband. Esther is watching the windows. If they see us leaving, they will panic. Caleb is desperate. A desperate man with a gun and a deadline does not surrender. He starts shooting. He might hit Zoe. He might hit me. And even if we get away, the Russians are still out there. The debt is still there. They will hunt us down. To end this, I had to destroy the threat completely. I had to make Caleb destroy himself. And to do that, the stage had to remain set. I closed my knife. I put it back in my pocket. Zoe watched me. Her eyes widened in confusion. Dad! What are you doing? Cut the ties. I shook my head slowly. My voice was low and steady. I cannot do that, Zoe. Not yet. What? Dad, please. It hurts. I want to go home. We are home, Zoe, and we are going to take it back. But if I untie you now, he will know I was here. He will know the element of surprise is gone. He will grab Mia. He will use her as a shield. Do you want that? No. But I cannot stay here. I am scared. I leaned down. I put my hands on her face. I forced her to look at me. Listen to me. You are a Jefferson. You are strong. You have endured 3 days of this hell. I am asking you to endure 3 more hours. 3 hours. Yes. I have Mia. She is safe. She is in the bunker. She is warm and she is sleeping. Caleb thinks she is freezing in the hole. That is his weakness. He thinks he has the leverage. We are going to let him think that. Zoe sobbed. Her body shook against the chair. He is going to come back, Dad. He comes back every hour to check on me. He points the gun at me. He tells me how he is going to spend the money. Let him talk. He is a coward. Cowards love to talk when they think they have won. When he comes back, you have to be strong. You have to pretend I never came here. Cry if you have to. Beg him if you have to. Feed his ego. Make him feel powerful. Because a man who feels powerful makes mistakes. I stood up. I looked at the zip ties one last time. I wanted to rip them off with my bare hands. I hated myself in that moment. I felt like a monster. But monsters are what you need to fight monsters. I am going to leave the door unlocked, but I will engage the latch so it looks closed. When the time comes, you will hear a signal. What signal? You will know it when you hear it. It will sound like the world is ending. When you hear that sound, you pull your hands apart. I am going to loosen the locking mechanism inside the plastic tie just enough. It will hold if you sit still, but if you yank it hard, it will break. I took the tip of my knife and carefully manipulated the small tab inside the block of the zip tie. It was a delicate operation. Too much and it would pop open now. Too little and she would be trapped forever. I felt it click. It was ready. I kissed her forehead. She was sweating. She smelled of fear and sour milk. I love you, Zoe. Trust me. I do, Dad. I taped her mouth back up. I did it gently, but it still felt like violence. I saw her eyes squeeze shut as the adhesive touched her skin. I turned and walked to the door. I looked back one last time. She was alone in the soundproof box, a prisoner in her own home. I stepped out and closed the heavy steel door. I reset the shim so the latch engaged. The red light pulsed, locked. I stood in the hallway for a moment, breathing hard. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I had just left my daughter in a torture chamber. I wanted to vomit, but I swallowed the bile. I turned my focus to the stairs. It was 5 p.m. The sun was going down. The shadows were getting long. It was showtime. Caleb wanted a tragedy tonight. I was going to give him one, but he was not the author of this story anymore. I was, and my version ended differently. I walked down to the second floor. I made my footsteps heavy. I whistled a tune. I whistled Amazing Grace. I wanted them to hear me coming. I wanted them to know the old man was clean and refreshed and ready for his final act. I reached the top of the main staircase. I looked down into the foyer. The chandelier was lit. It cast a golden glow on the polished wood. It looked like a stage. I touched the banister. It was time to prepare the weapon. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small jar of clear silicone grease I had taken from the workshop. I knelt down on the top step. I applied a thin, invisible layer to the edge of the first 3 stairs. It was slicker than ice. Caleb had drawn a diagram. He wanted me to fall. He wanted gravity to do the work. I was just helping him with the physics. But physics is a double-edged sword. It does not care who steps on the grease. It only cares about momentum. I stood up and wiped my hands on my pants. I looked at the front door. The guests would be arriving soon. The lawyer, the goons, the witnesses to my demise. Come on in, gentlemen. The floor is yours. At exactly 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang. It was not the polite chime of a neighbor. It was a long, impatient press. Caleb jumped up from the sofa like he had been shocked with a cattle prod. He smoothed his sweater and ran to the door. He looked like a man who was about to let the devil into the house because he owed him a favor. I stood by the fireplace. I had a glass of whiskey in my hand. It was watered down because I needed a clear head. I watched the door open. The wind blew in carrying snowflakes and the smell of cheap cologne. 3 men walked in. The first man was short and round. He wore a suit that was too tight across the shoulders. He carried a briefcase that looked more expensive than his car. This was Mr. Sterling. Caleb called him a lawyer. I called him a vulture. He had the kind of smile that made you check your pockets to make sure your wallet was still there. Behind him were 2 men who did not belong in a suburban living room. They were tall and broad. They wore leather jackets and jeans. Their knuckles were scarred. They did not look at the furniture or the paintings. They looked at the exits. They looked at the windows. They were professionals, but they were not security guards. They were enforcers. Caleb ushered them in. He was sweating. He was trying to act like the host of a dinner party, but he looked like a hostage. "Mr. Sterling, thank you for coming. This is my father-in-law, Frank Jefferson." Sterling walked over to me. He extended a hand. His palm was damp. I did not shake it. I just took a sip of my whiskey and stared at him. He pulled his hand back and laughed nervously. "A pleasure, Mr. Jefferson. Caleb has told me so much about you. I bet he has. Did he tell you I usually shoot trespassers?" Sterling froze. Caleb stepped in quickly. "Frank is joking. He has a dry sense of humor. Please sit down. Dinner is ready." We moved to the dining room. It was a farce. Esther had set the table with her best china. She had roasted a beef tenderloin. She was acting like we were having a normal family gathering. But there were two thugs standing by the kitchen door with their arms crossed. There was a lawyer opening a briefcase on the sideboard, and there was a palpable tension that made the air feel thick. I sat at the head of the table. It was my seat. Sterling sat to my right. Caleb sat to my left. Esther sat at the far end. She would not meet my eyes. She was focused on folding her napkin into a perfect triangle. She was trying to create order in a chaotic world. Esther brought out the food. She served Sterling first, then Caleb, then me. Her hands were steady, too steady. She had taken something to calm her nerves. Maybe the same pills Caleb was popping. Sterling did not eat. He pushed his plate aside. He pulled a thick document from his briefcase. He placed it on the tablecloth. The white paper looked bright against the dark wood. "Mr. Jefferson, I know you are a busy man, so I will get straight to the point. Caleb tells me you are looking to liquidate your assets, specifically this property." I cut a piece of meat. I put it in my mouth. I chewed slowly. I swallowed. "Caleb is mistaken. I am not selling. This land has been in my family for 3 generations if you count the sweat I put into it. I plan to die here." Sterling smiled. It was a patronizing smile. "We all have plans, Frank, but plans change. The market is volatile, and Caleb here has made some commitments that require immediate liquidity. We are offering you a very generous buyout." I looked at the paper. I did not need to read the fine print. I saw the number at the bottom. It was 10% of the market value. It was a robbery. This is not an offer. This is an insult. Sterling sighed. He looked at Caleb. He nodded slightly. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The temperature dropped 10 degrees. The pretense of civility evaporated. Caleb stopped eating. He pushed his chair back. The legs scraped loudly against the floor. He stood up. He was not the nervous son-in-law anymore. He was a desperate animal backed into a corner. He reached into the waistband of his trousers. He pulled out a gun. It was a Glock 19, black polymer. Standard issue. He did not point it at me. Not yet. He placed it on the table. It landed with a heavy metallic thud right next to the crystal water pitcher. The sound silenced the room. The clock on the wall seemed to tick louder. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Caleb looked at me. His eyes were wild. "Sign the paper, Frank." I looked at the gun. Then I looked at him. I did not flinch. I did not gasp. I have stared down barrels before. I drove supply trucks through riots in the 70s. A boy with a toy does not scare me. Is that how we do business now, Caleb? With a gun on the dinner table? This is not business, Frank. This is survival. I need this money. I need it tonight. You are going to sign that transfer deed. You are going to date it for yesterday. And then you are going to take a walk down the stairs. I leaned back in my chair. I swirled the whiskey in my glass. And if I refuse? Caleb picked up the gun. His hand was shaking, but his finger was on the trigger. He pointed it at my chest. Then you do not get to walk down the stairs. You tumble. And Esther becomes a widow. She inherits the land. She signs the paper. The result is the same. The only difference is how much pain you feel before you die. I looked at the two thugs by the door. They had moved closer. They were ready to hold me down if necessary. Sterling was watching with a bored expression. He had seen this before. He was just here for the signature. I turned my head slowly toward the end of the table, toward Esther. My wife sat there. She was eating a potato. She carefully cut it into 4 pieces. She put a piece in her mouth. She chewed. She swallowed. She did not look at the gun. She did not look at Caleb. And she did not look at me. Esther, my voice was low. Your son-in-law has a gun pointed at my heart. He is threatening to kill me in my own dining room. Esther took a sip of wine. She wiped her lips with the napkin. I know Frank. You know. I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the lines on her face that I had kissed 1,000 times. I saw the hands that I had held during childbirth. I saw the woman I had worked double shifts for so she could have a nice car and a warm house. Esther, tell him to put the gun down. Tell him this is insanity. We can fix the debt. We have savings. We do not need to do this. Esther finally looked up. Her eyes were empty. There was no love in them. There was no hate either. There was just a cold indifference that was far worse than hate. The savings are gone, Frank. Caleb spent them. She said it casually, like she was talking about the weather. I know he spent them, but we have the land. We can sell a parcel. We do not need to sign everything over to sharks. We do not need murder. Esther sighed. She sounded tired. She sounded like she was bored with the conversation. It is too late for that, Frank. We want the money now. We want it all. Yes. I felt a sharp pain in my chest. It was not a heart attack. It was the feeling of 40 years of marriage turning into dust. So, you are part of this. You helped him dig the hole. I did not help him dig. I just told him where the soil was softest. She smiled. A small, cruel smile. You chose money over me, Esther. You chose a trip to Paris over the man who stood by you when you had cancer, the man who raised your daughter. Esther stood up. She walked over to Caleb. She put a hand on his shoulder. She looked at me with disdain. I chose life, Frank. You are old. You are boring. You count every penny. You obsess over this house. You treat me like an employee, not a wife. Caleb promised me freedom. He promised me a penthouse in Miami. He promised me adventure. You only promised me another 40 years of sitting in this drafty house watching you clean your guns. She leaned over the table. Her face was twisted. I am tired of waiting for you to die, Frank. You are too healthy. You are too stubborn. So we are speeding up the process. Do not take it personally. It is just business. She looked at Caleb. Make him sign it. I am going to pack my bags. I want to be ready to leave as soon as the ambulance comes. She turned and walked out of the room. She did not look back. She left me alone with 3 wolves and a loaded gun. I watched her go, and with every step she took, she stripped away the last ounce of mercy I had in my heart. I had given her a chance. I had given her one last opportunity to show a shred of humanity. She threw it away. Now I was free. I had no wife. I had no son-in-law. I only had targets. I looked back at Caleb. The gun was still pointed at my chest. Okay, Caleb, you win. Give me the pen. Caleb grinned. It was a victory grin. He thought he had broken me. He thought the betrayal had crushed my spirit. He did not know that he had just cut the only chain holding the beast back. Sterling slid a gold pen across the table. I picked it up. It felt heavy and cold. I uncapped it. I looked at the signature line. I will sign, but I need my reading glasses. They are in my jacket pocket. I stood up slowly. I kept my hands where they could see them. Sit down, Frank. I am just getting my glasses, Caleb. I cannot sign what I cannot see. I reached for my jacket draped over the back of the chair. My hand brushed against the pocket. I felt the cold steel of the Zippo lighter, and next to it the remote trigger for the house blackout protocol. Caleb nodded. Make it quick, old man. You have a flight of stairs to catch. I smiled. A real smile this time. Don't worry, son. The trip down is always faster than the climb up. I put on my reading glasses. The wire frame sat heavy on my nose. I made sure my hands trembled visible. It was a performance I had practiced in the mirror 1,000 times, not for this moment, but for the day I would get too old to hold a hammer. I wanted to see if I could fake the frailty of age. Today, that practice was saving my life. I looked down at the document. The text was dense, legal jargon designed to strip a man of his legacy in 3 paragraphs. Transfer of deed, power of attorney, immediate liquidation rights. Caleb watched me with a predatory grin. He was enjoying this. To him, this was not just about money. It was about dominance. He hated that I had calluses on my hands. He hated that I bought my trucks with cash while he leased his luxury sedans. He hated that I was the patriarch he could never be. Seeing me broken and shaking with a pen in my hand was better than any drug he could buy. He leaned in close. His breath smelled of expensive scotch and fear. Go ahead, Frank. Sign it. Do not worry about the spelling. Just make your mark. We know your hands are tired. I looked up at him over the rim of my glasses. I let my lower lip quiver. Caleb, please. This land is all I have. My father bought the first acre with money he saved from shining shoes. Do not take it. Caleb laughed. It was a wet, ugly sound. Your father is dead, Frank, and you are about to join him. Nobody cares about the history of the dirt. We only care about the value of the zoning permit. Sign the paper, or I will let these gentlemen break your fingers one by one before we throw you down the stairs. I looked at the two thugs. One of them cracked his knuckles. It was a cliché, but it was effective. I looked back at the paper. I lowered the pen. The tip hovered over the signature line. I took a deep, shaky breath. I wanted them to remember this moment. I wanted them to remember the feeling of absolute victory. Because the fall from the top is always fatal. I pressed the pen to the paper. The ink flowed black and permanent. I wrote slowly. I made the letters large and looped. I took my time. Caleb tapped his foot impatiently. Faster, old man. We do not have all night. I finished the last letter with a flourish. I capped the pen. I placed it gently next to the document. I took off my glasses and folded them. I looked at Caleb. The trembling in my hands stopped instantly. The fear in my eyes vanished. I sat back in my chair and crossed my arms. There. It is done. Caleb snatched the paper from the table like a starving dog. He did not even look at it at first. He just held it up to the light as if it were a winning lottery ticket. Finally. You finally did something smart, Frank. He handed the paper to Sterling, the lawyer. Check it. Make sure it is legal. Then we can proceed with the accident. Sterling adjusted his tie. He looked bored. He took the document and pulled a notary stamp from his briefcase. He was ready to make my death official. He looked down at the signature line. He raised his stamp. Then he froze. His hand hovered in midair. He squinted. He brought the paper closer to his face. His boredom evaporated. His face turned a shade of pale that matched the linen napkins. What is this? Caleb was pouring himself another drink. He did not look up. What is what? It is his signature. Stamp it so we can get to work. Sterling slammed the paper down on the table. The sound made the crystal glasses ring. This is not a signature, Caleb. Look at it. Caleb frowned. He picked up the paper. He read the name I had written in bold black ink. Judas Iscariot. He read it out loud. He blinked. He read it again. Judas Iscariot. He looked at me. Confusion clouded his face. What the hell is this, Frank? Is this a joke? You think this is funny? Sign your real name. Now. I picked up my whiskey. I took a slow, deliberate sip. The burn felt good. I cannot sign my real name, Caleb. It would be fraud. Fraud. What are you talking about? You are Franklin Jefferson. You own this land. I shook my head. I smiled. It was the smile of a chess player who just announced mate in 3 moves. Correction. I used to own this land. Past tense. Sterling stood up. He looked at me with laser focus. He was a lawyer. He smelled a rat. Explain yourself, Mr. Jefferson, and do it quickly before my associates lose their patience. I leaned forward. I spoke clearly and enunciated every syllable. 3 days ago, before I left for my hunting trip, I stopped by the courthouse. I filed a quitclaim deed. I transferred the ownership of this entire property, the house, the land, the garage, everything. Caleb turned purple. The vein in his forehead bulged. Transferred to who? You have no one else. Zoe is tied up upstairs. I checked your accounts. You did not sell it. I did not sell it, Caleb. I gave it away. I established an irrevocable charitable trust, the Jefferson Foundation for At-Risk Youth. The paperwork was filed and processed on Tuesday morning. The beneficiary is the State Charity Board. The room went silent. Dead silent. Even the wind outside seemed to stop listening. Sterling grabbed the paper from Caleb. He looked at me with new eyes. He was calculating. An irrevocable trust. You are lying. We would have seen it in the title search. I shrugged. Title searches take 48 hours to update in the county database. You checked the records 3 days ago. The update went live this afternoon at 5 o'clock. You can check your phone if you want, but I warn you, the signal in here is terrible. I was lying, of course. There was no trust. There was no charity. The land was still mine, but they did not know that. And in the world of high-stakes negotiation, perception is reality. I used terms I knew they understood. Irrevocable. State board. These were words that meant bureaucracy. These were words that meant red tape. Caleb dropped the gun. It clattered on the table. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. You gave it away. You gave my inheritance to a bunch of orphans. I looked him dead in the eye. Better the orphans than a man who digs graves for his family in the backyard. Caleb roared. It was a primal sound of pure rage. He grabbed the gun. He pointed it at my face. His hand was shaking so bad the barrel was vibrating. I will kill you. I will kill you right now. I do not care about the money anymore. I just want to see your brains on the wall. He cocked the hammer. Click. I did not move. I did not blink. I held his gaze. Do it, Caleb. Pull the trigger. But listen to me very carefully before you do. I pointed a finger at Sterling. Ask your lawyer what happens to an irrevocable trust if the grantor dies under suspicious circumstances. Sterling lunged forward. He grabbed Caleb's arm. He shoved the gun away. No, do not shoot. Caleb struggled. Get off me. He ruined everything. He deserves to die. You idiot. Listen to him. Sterling slapped Caleb. It was a sharp, stinging slap. Caleb froze. If you kill him now, the trust locks down. The state launches an investigation. The probate court seals the assets for years. We get nothing. Zero. Sterling turned to me. He was sweating now. He wiped his forehead with a silk handkerchief. But if the grantor is alive, if the grantor was mentally incompetent when he signed the trust, or if the grantor decides to petition the court to dissolve the trust due to a filing error, then the land can be reclaimed. I nodded. I raised my glass in a mock toast. Bingo. Give the man a prize. The only person on this earth who can undo that trust is me. I have to appear before a judge. I have to testify that I made a mistake. I have to sign the reversal documents. I took another sip of whiskey. So here is your dilemma, gentlemen. You need this land to pay off the Russians by tomorrow. The only way to get the land is to dissolve the trust. The only way to dissolve the trust is to keep me alive and happy. If I die, if I slip down the stairs, if I have a heart attack, the land goes to the state forever. And you, Caleb, you get to explain to the Russians why you have no money and no collateral. Caleb lowered the gun. He looked at Sterling. He looked at me. He looked at the floor. The reality of the situation crashed down on him. He had planned a murder. Now he had to plan a rescue mission for the man he wanted to kill. Sterling paced the room. He was muttering to himself. We need him alive. We need him in court tomorrow morning. We can force him. We can drug him. I interrupted him. You can try. But judges are suspicious of drugged old men. If I slur my words, if I look coerced, the judge will appoint a guardian ad litem and delay the hearing for months. You need me lucid. You need me cooperative. I stood up. I walked over to the window. I looked out at the snow. So, it looks like nobody is falling down the stairs tonight. Caleb sank into a chair. He put his head in his hands. He looked defeated. But I knew better. A rat is most dangerous when it is trapped. He looked up at me. His eyes were red. We do not have to kill you, Frank. But we can make you wish you were dead. We have Zoe. We have Mia. You will go to court tomorrow. You will reverse the trust, or I will start sending you pieces of your daughter. I turned around. I faced him. This was the pivot point. I had shifted from victim to hostage. Now I had to shift to the offensive. You touch a hair on their heads and I will bite my own tongue off. I will swallow it. And I will choke to death right here on this rug, and you will watch your $2 million turn into a coroner's report. I walked back to the table. I picked up the bottle of whiskey. I poured myself another glass. I poured one for Caleb, too. I slid it across the table. Drink up, son. You look like you need it. We have a long night ahead of us. Sterling looked at the two thugs. Take him downstairs. Put him in the wine cellar. Lock the door. One of you stands guard outside. The other patrols the perimeter. Nobody enters. Nobody leaves. The thugs moved toward me. They grabbed my arms. They were rough. They wanted to hurt me because I had complicated their easy job. I did not resist. I let them pull me toward the basement door. I looked back at Caleb one last time. Sleep tight, Caleb. Do not let the bedbugs bite, or the ghosts. He threw the glass of whiskey at me. It shattered against the wall near my head. I laughed. As they dragged me down into the darkness, I was not afraid. I was going exactly where I wanted to go. They were throwing Brer Rabbit into the briar patch. They were locking me in the wine cellar. But they forgot one thing. The wine cellar shares a wall with my workshop. And in my workshop, I have tools that can cut through concrete. But more importantly, the wine cellar was the access point to the ventilation shaft that led directly to the bunker. They thought they were putting me in a cage. They were actually putting me in the cockpit. The heavy door slammed shut. The lock clicked. I stood in the darkness. I smelled the dust and the old corks. I waited until I heard their footsteps fade away. Then I reached for the light switch, but I did not turn it on. I reached behind the wine rack. I felt for the loose brick. I pushed it. Click. The game was just beginning, and now I had the home field advantage. The heavy oak door slammed shut behind me. I heard the deadbolt slide into place with a definitive metallic thunk. Then I heard the second lock engage. They were taking no chances, or so they thought. I stood in the absolute darkness of the wine cellar. The air was cool and smelled of damp earth and aging cork. I could hear the muffled footsteps of the guard outside the door. He was pacing. He was probably checking his phone and thinking about how easy this money was. He had no idea he was guarding an empty room. I did not move immediately. I let my eyes adjust to the dark. I breathed in the silence. Most men would panic in this situation. They would pound on the door. They would scream for mercy. They would bargain. But I am not most men. I am a man who spent 40 years calculating risks and securing cargo, and right now I was the most dangerous cargo in this house. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my Zippo. I flicked the lid open and struck the wheel. The flame flared up, casting dancing shadows on the rows of dusty bottles. I walked past the rack of French Bordeaux that Esther bought to impress her friends. I walked past the crates of Italian vintage that Caleb pretended to understand. I went to the back wall, to the section that held the cheap California Reds. The section nobody in this house ever touched because it was beneath their dignity. I counted the bricks from the floor up. 1, 2, 3, 4. I counted the bricks from the corner out. 1, 2, 3. I pressed my thumb against the center of the third brick. It looked like mortar and stone, but it was a pressure-sensitive plate disguised with textured epoxy. There was a soft hiss. The hydraulic seals released. A section of the wall 4 feet wide and 6 feet high swung inward silently. It did not scrape. It did not squeak. I maintained my hinges. I stepped through the opening. The air changed instantly. The smell of dust was replaced by the smell of ozone and gun oil. The humidity dropped. The temperature rose to a steady 68 degrees. I was back in the bunker. I hit the button on the inside wall. The secret door glided shut and sealed itself with a magnetic lock that could withstand a battering ram. I was safe. But safety was not the goal. Retribution was the goal, was the key. I walked to the command center. I sat in the ergonomic chair that faced the wall of monitors. I woke up the system. The screens flickered to life. 9 different angles of my home appeared in high definition. It was a strange feeling to watch your own life from the outside. It felt like watching a reality show where the contestants are about to be eliminated. I looked at the dining room camera. Caleb was pouring another drink. His hand was shaking less now. He was celebrating. He was laughing with Sterling. He thought the problem was solved. He thought the old man was locked away in the dark, waiting to be dragged to court in the morning. I looked at the hallway camera. The thug guarding the cellar door was leaning against the wall playing a game on his phone. He was relaxed. He was bored. I looked at the camera inside the soundproof attic. Zoe was still sitting in the chair. Her head was down. She was weeping silently. My heart tightened. Hang in there, baby girl. The cavalry is not coming. The cavalry is already here. I opened the weapon locker. I took out the Remington 870 again. I checked the safety. I racked the slide. The sound was comforting. I placed it on the desk next to the microphone console. I was ready to start the show. But first I needed to change the atmosphere. A party needs the right music, and a siege needs the right psychological pressure. I accessed the smart home control panel. I had installed high-end speakers in every room of the house. Caleb insisted on them so he could play his jazz playlists during his parties. He wanted surround sound. I was about to give him surround fear. I disabled the manual volume controls in the house. I set the master volume to level 8. Loud enough to be clear, loud enough to be impossible to ignore. I leaned into the microphone. I pressed the talk button. The red light came on. I was live. I watched the dining room monitor. Caleb was raising his glass for a toast. Sterling was smiling. I spoke. "This is your landlord speaking." My voice boomed through the house. It echoed off the vaulted ceilings. It resonated in the crystal glasses. On the screen, Caleb dropped his glass. It shattered on the table. Whiskey and glass flew everywhere. Sterling jumped out of his chair so fast he knocked it over. The two thugs in the hallway drew their guns and spun around in circles looking for the source. Caleb looked at the ceiling. He looked at the walls. He was spinning like a top. Where is he? How is he doing that? He screamed at the guard outside the cellar. "Check the door. Open the door." I watched the guard on the hallway monitor. He fumbled with the key. He unlocked the cellar door and kicked it open. He aimed his gun into the darkness. "Boss, it is empty." "What?" "He is gone. The room is empty. There is nobody here." Caleb turned pale. He looked like he was going to vomit. He ran into the hallway. He looked into the empty cellar. He saw the wine racks. He saw the stone walls. But he did not see me. I pressed the talk button again. "You are looking in the wrong place, Caleb. You always look in the wrong places. You look at the surface. You never look at the foundation." Caleb yelled at the ceiling. His voice was cracking. "Where are you, Frank? Come out. I have your daughter. I will kill her. I swear to God I will kill her." I laughed. I let the laughter amplify through the speakers. It sounded deep and distorted. It sounded like it was coming from the walls themselves. "You will not touch her, Caleb, because you have bigger problems right now. You have a math problem. Math. What are you talking about? You dug 2 holes in the backyard. One for Mia, one for me. I saw them." Caleb froze. His eyes darted to the window. "But you made a miscalculation, son. You forgot about displacement. You forgot that when you bury secrets, they have a way of rising to the surface." I paused. I let the silence hang for a moment. I watched him sweating. I watched his chest heaving. "Why don't you go check the backyard, Caleb? Go look at your handiwork." He shook his head. "No, I am not going out there. You are out there. You are waiting with a gun. I am not outside, Caleb. I am everywhere. I am in the walls. I am in the floor. I am the house. And the house is angry. Go check the hole." I commanded it. My voice was hard as steel. "Go check the hole, or I release the audio recording of you planning my murder to the police right now. I have it queued up. One button press and the 911 dispatch gets a direct feed." Caleb panicked. He looked at Sterling. Sterling was backing away. The lawyer knew when a situation had gone from bad to catastrophic. "Go check it, Caleb. If he calls the police, we are all done." Caleb grabbed one of the thugs. "You, come with me." They ran to the back door. Caleb unlocked it with trembling hands. He stepped out into the snow. The floodlights were on. The backyard was bright as day. I switched my view to the exterior camera. I zoomed in on the oak tree. Caleb ran to the spot where he had dug the graves. He stopped. He stared. He dropped to his knees. The hole was gone. The second hole. The one he dug for me. It was filled in. The dirt was packed down smooth. It looked like it had never been disturbed. He clawed at the dirt. He was confused. He knew he dug it. He had the blisters to prove it. But that was not the surprise. The surprise was what was sitting on top of the fresh dirt. I had used the hydraulic lift system I installed for the underground irrigation maintenance to push the soil back up from below. It was a feature designed to fix pipes without digging. But tonight it was a magic trick. But I left him a gift. Sitting in the middle of the patch of dirt was a briefcase. It was his briefcase, the one I had taken from the guest room, the one with the debt notes, the one with the murder plan. He opened it. He saw the papers were gone. And in their place was a single sheet of paper. I spoke into the microphone one last time. "Did you find it, Caleb?" He looked up at the camera mounted on the garage. He knew I was watching. "Find what? Where are my papers?" I leaned back in my chair. "The papers are safe. But the hole is not empty, Caleb. I filled it." But not with dirt. I lied. The hole was just dirt, but he did not know that. I filled it with the only thing you care about, your future. Now get back inside. It is cold out there, and we have a long night ahead of us. Caleb stood up. He looked at the house. He looked at the dark windows. He realized for the first time that he was not the master of this domain. He was the intruder. And the house was closing in on him. He walked back toward the kitchen door. His steps were slow. He looked like a man walking to the gallows. I checked the shotgun again. I checked the monitors. I checked on Zoe. Phase 1 was complete. I had confused them. I had separated them. I had terrified them. Now it was time for Phase 2. Isolation. I reached for the power grid control. Lights out. I watched him on the high-definition monitor in my bunker. Caleb stepped out of the back door like a man walking onto the surface of the moon. The floodlights I had installed last summer turned the backyard into a stage of blinding white snow and long black shadows. The wind was howling now. It whipped his expensive cashmere sweater around his body. He was shivering, but not just from the cold. He was shivering because the voice of a man he thought was locked in a cellar had just spoken to him from the sky. He walked toward the old oak tree. His steps were hesitant. He kept looking back at the house as if expecting the windows to shatter or the roof to collapse. He was holding a shovel he had grabbed from the porch, but he held it like a weapon, not a tool. He was expecting a fight. He was expecting to see me standing there with a shotgun, but the yard was empty. There was only the wind and the snow and the silence of the winter night. He reached the spot. He stopped dead in his tracks. The shovel slipped from his gloved hand and fell silently into a drift. He stared at the ground. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The hole was gone. 6 hours ago, he had spent 3 hours digging a grave 6 feet deep and 3 feet wide. He had piled the dirt high on the side. He had smoothed the edges. He had prepared a final resting place for me. But now the ground was flat. The mound of dirt was gone. The hole was filled. It looked as if the earth had simply healed itself. He fell to his knees. He clawed at the snow. He touched the dirt. It was packed hard. It was impossible. A hole that size does not just disappear. To fill it manually would take 2 men an hour of back-breaking labor. But he had been inside the house the whole time. He had the only key to the back door. He did not understand because he did not know the history of this land. He did not know that 20 years ago I installed a massive underground hydraulic drainage system to prevent flooding from the nearby creek. I laid the pipes myself. I installed the heavy-duty industrial pistons capable of lifting tons of soil to clear blockages. I buried them deep below the frost line. It was a system designed to move the earth. And tonight, I had engaged the emergency purge protocol from my console. With the push of a button, 4 hydraulic rams had extended, pushing the displaced soil back into the cavity from below and packing it tight with 3,000 pounds of pressure. To Caleb, it was magic. To me, it was just mechanics. I saw him looking around wildly. He was hyperventilating. He touched his face. He slapped his own cheek to wake himself up. He thought he was losing his mind. He thought he was hallucinating. The reality he knew was breaking down. The laws of physics seemed to bend around me. That is what happens when you underestimate a logistics manager. We control the environment. We control the flow. He grabbed the shovel again. He started to dig. He had to know. He had to prove to himself that the hole had existed. He slammed the metal blade into the semi-frozen earth. Clang. He threw the dirt over his shoulder. He was frantic. He was crying now. Tears of pure confusion and terror. He dug like a dog trying to find a buried bone. He ruined his Italian leather shoes. He tore his pants. He did not care. He needed to find the bottom. I zoomed in the camera. I wanted to see his face when he hit the payload. I had not just filled the hole with dirt. I had buried something there for him to find. A time capsule of his own destruction. He dug down 2 feet. He was panting. Steam rose from his body. His movements were jerky and desperate. Then the shovel hit something that did not sound like a rock. It was a dull thud, a hollow sound. He froze. He dropped the shovel. He fell to his knees in the mud. He used his hands. He clawed at the dirt. He pulled up a leather handle. He brushed the soil away. It was a briefcase, but it was not just any briefcase. It was his briefcase. The black designer leather bag he kept locked in the guest room, the bag he thought was safe upstairs. He pulled it out. It was heavy. He sat back on his heels. He looked at the house. He looked right at the camera lens on the garage, though he could not see me. He knew. In that moment, he knew I was watching. He opened the latches. Click, click. He threw the lid open. He expected to find his papers. He expected to find the loan documents and the insurance policies and the foreclosure notices, but I had taken those. Those were safe in my evidence locker. Instead, he found the source of his debt. I had filled the briefcase with the records I had pulled from his cloud account. I had printed every email he sent to the offshore gambling sites. I had printed the chat logs with the Russian loan sharks where he promised them my land. I had printed the transfer receipts showing how he embezzled money from Zoe's savings account to buy cryptocurrency that crashed to zero. And right on top of the pile, I had placed a single photograph. It was a photo of him and Esther sitting at a cafe in Paris, taken 2 years ago. On the back in my handwriting, I had written a date. The date was tomorrow. And below the date, I wrote one word: canceled. Caleb stared at the papers. He picked them up one by one. His hands were shaking so violently he dropped them in the snow. These were his crimes. These were the secrets he would have killed to keep hidden. He thought he had deleted them. He thought he had covered his tracks. But here they were buried in the grave he dug for me. He realized then that I had been inside his digital life for months. He realized that while he was planning to push me down the stairs, I was downloading his entire existence. He looked at the loan shark logs. He read his own words where he called me a stupid old mule. He read the part where he offered Mia as collateral if the payment was late. He screamed. It was a sound of pure anguish. He threw the briefcase across the yard. Papers flew into the wind like white birds. They scattered across the snow. Evidence of his greed was now decorating my backyard. He stood up. He spun around. He was looking for a target, but there was no one to fight. That was the beauty of it. He was out there in the cold, fighting a phantom. I spoke into the microphone again. "Pick them up, Caleb. Do not litter in my yard." He jumped a foot in the air. He looked at the sky. "Frank, stop it. Stop playing games. Come out and face me like a man." "I am facing you, Caleb. I am looking right at you, but you are not seeing a man. You are seeing the consequences of your actions." He ran toward the house, but he stopped at the door. He was afraid to go back in. He was trapped. Outside was the cold and the voice of God. Inside was the dark and the unknown. He looked at the window of the master bedroom. He shouted for Esther. "Esther, help me. He is watching us. He knows everything." But Esther did not come to the window. I had locked the master bedroom shutters from the console. She was sealed in just like he was locked out. Caleb backed away from the house. He looked small. He looked fragile. The arrogant man who sat at my breakfast table this morning and mocked my memory was gone. In his place was a terrified child who had realized the monsters under the bed were real. He realized that he was not dealing with a senile retiree. He was dealing with a man who could move the earth, a man who could walk through walls, a man who could snatch his secrets from the cloud and bury them in the ground. He looked at the filled hole again. He understood the message. I did not need to kill him. I did not need to push him down the stairs. I had already buried him. I had buried his reputation. I had buried his future. And I had done it without lifting a finger. He dropped his head. He was hyperventilating. The cold was getting to him. The adrenaline was fading and the freeze was setting in. He walked slowly to the back door. He tried the handle. It was locked. I had engaged the deadbolt remotely. "Let me in, Frank. Please. It is freezing." I waited. I let him stand there for a full minute. I let him feel the bite of the wind. I let him think about the temperature in that hole where he put Mia. "Say it, Caleb. Say what you are." He leaned his forehead against the door. He was sobbing. "I am a thief. I am a liar. And what else? I am a coward." I hit the release button. The lock clicked. "Come inside, Caleb. Class is in session, and we have not even started the final exam yet." He opened the door and stumbled into the kitchen. He fell onto the floor. He was broken. But I was not done breaking him. I checked the monitors. The thugs were getting restless in the hallway. Sterling was pacing in the living room. They heard the screaming outside. They were nervous. Good. Fear is contagious. And Caleb was the carrier. I picked up the shotgun. I turned off the microphone. I looked at the image of Caleb lying on the kitchen floor surrounded by his wet, muddy footprints. He had brought the mud into my house. Now I was going to make him clean it up. I moved to the ventilation shaft. It was time to pay a visit to the living room. It was time to introduce Mr. Sterling to the concept of hostile negotiations. Caleb knew I was a ghost. Now the rest of them would find out that this house was haunted by a very angry spirit. I sat in the command chair of the bunker. My finger hovered over the master kill switch. It was a large red button encased in plastic. I had installed it 5 years ago not for intruders, but for electrical fires. It was designed to sever the connection to the main grid instantly. Tonight, it was going to sever their connection to confidence. I looked at the monitors. The house was bathed in the warm glow of the chandeliers and recessed lighting. It looked comfortable. It looked safe. That was the illusion I had built for my family. But the family was gone. Now it was just a hunting ground. I pressed the button. The sound was not a click. It was a heavy industrial thud that resonated through the floorboards. It was the sound of a giant heart stopping. On the screens, the video feed switched instantly to night vision. The warm colors vanished, replaced by the ghostly green and black of infrared. Upstairs, the reaction was immediate. Caleb screamed. It was a high-pitched sound like a child waking up from a nightmare. He was still on the kitchen floor. He curled into a fetal position. He was terrified of the dark. He always slept with a nightlight. I knew that. In the hallway, the two thugs did not scream. They were professionals. They went into tactical mode. I saw them crouch down. I saw the muzzle flashes of their flashlights cutting through the blackness. They swept the beams back and forth. Stay down. Back to the wall. One of them barked the order. I stood up. I picked up my night vision goggles. I put them on. The bunker turned green. I picked up a small bag of marbles I had taken from Mia's toy chest earlier. It seemed fitting. Toys for the children. Weapons for the adults. I moved to the ventilation shaft that exited behind the grandfather clock in the foyer. I needed to separate the herd. A pack of wolves is dangerous. A lone wolf is just a target. I climbed the ladder. I moved silently. My boots were wrapped in cloth to dampen the sound. I reached the grate. I peered out. The foyer was a cavern of shadows. The two thugs were moving slowly toward the kitchen. They wanted to secure Caleb. They wanted to regroup. I could not let that happen. I took a handful of marbles. I threw them hard against the far wall near the front door. Clack, clack, clack. The sound was sharp and distinct. It sounded like someone racking a shotgun slide or dropping a magazine. The lead thug spun around. Contact front. By the door. He signaled to his partner. You get the client. I will clear the room. Perfect. Divide and conquer. The second thug moved into the kitchen to grab Caleb. The first thug, the one with the scar on his neck, moved toward the foyer. He was big. He moved with the heavy confidence of a man who was used to intimidating people. He held his gun high. He swept his light across the furniture. I waited. I breathed. I was not in the foyer. I was already moving through the crawl space to the second floor landing. I watched him from the balcony railing. He was walking right into the kill zone. I had prepared the foyer stairs earlier, but I had added a second layer of defense that I had not mentioned to Caleb. Fishing line. 50-pound test line. Clear. Invisible in the dark, even with a flashlight if you do not know where to look. I had strung it across the bottom step at ankle height. The thug moved forward. He was focused on the front door. He thought I was hiding in the coat closet. He took a step, then another. He reached the stairs. He stepped forward with his right foot. His shin hit the line. It did not break. His momentum carried his upper body forward, but his feet stayed behind. He went airborne. It was simple physics. A body in motion stays in motion until it hits a marble floor. He crashed down. His gun skittered across the tiles. He landed hard on his shoulder. I heard the air leave his lungs in a grunt. He tried to scramble up. He reached for his weapon, but he was standing on the second trap. I had emptied the entire bottle of silicone grease on that section of the floor. It was slicker than oil on glass. He tried to plant his foot. It slid out from under him. He fell again. This time he fell backward. His head hit the bottom step with a sickening crack. He groaned. He tried to move his leg, but it was twisted at an unnatural angle. He had shattered his ankle when he hit the floor. I leaned over the railing. I spoke into the darkness. My voice was just a whisper, but in the silent house it carried like a shout. Stay down. The next step is rigged with a pressure plate. You move and you lose a foot. It was a lie. There was no pressure plate. But pain makes men believe anything. He froze. He held his leg and whimpered. He was out of the fight. 1 down, 2 to go. I moved back into the shadows. I needed to deal with the second thug, the one in the kitchen. I checked my watch. It was 10 minutes past 8. The temperature in the house was dropping rapidly without the heating system. Good. Cold makes the fingers numb. Numb fingers cannot pull triggers accurately. I made my way to the kitchen pantry. This was not a normal pantry. It was a walk-in unit I had built to store game meat. I hunted elk and deer. I needed space to hang carcasses. I needed industrial cold. The walls were 6 inches thick. The door was solid steel with a heavy latch. I entered the pantry from the back service door that connected to the garage. It was freezing inside. The cooling unit was on a separate backup battery. It hummed softly. I cracked the main door that led into the kitchen just an inch. I could see the kitchen through the slit. The second thug was trying to pull Caleb up from the floor. Caleb was dead weight. He was sobbing and clutching the thug's leg. "Get up, you idiot. We have to move. I cannot see. He is here. He is in the dark. Shut up and move." The thug dragged Caleb toward the hallway. He was distracted. He was looking toward the foyer where his partner had fallen. I took a can of soup from the shelf, a heavy can of tomato bisque. I rolled it across the floor of the pantry. It hit the metal shelving unit. Clang. The thug stopped. He spun around toward the pantry door. He pushed Caleb away. "Who is there?" He raised his flashlight. The beam cut across the kitchen and landed on the pantry door. I stayed hidden behind the hanging row of cured sausages. I waited. The thug moved closer. He was cautious. He kicked the door open with his foot. He shined the light inside. The beam hit the rows of canned goods. It hit the hanging meat. It looked like a slaughterhouse in there. "Clear," he muttered to himself. He took a step inside. He wanted to make sure nobody was behind the door. He was thorough. That was his mistake. He stepped across the threshold. He scanned the left side. I was on the right side. I stepped out from behind the meat rack. I did not use a gun. I used a stunning baton I kept for unruly livestock. I jammed it into his ribs. I thumbed the switch. 50,000 volts surged through his body. He convulsed. His muscles locked up. He dropped his gun. He made a sound like a gargle. I kicked him hard in the chest. He flew backward deeper into the pantry. He crashed into a shelf of pickle jars. Glass shattered. Brine and vinegar splashed everywhere. I stepped back out into the kitchen. I grabbed the heavy steel handle of the pantry door. He tried to scramble up. He was slipping on the pickle juice. He looked at me. His eyes were wide with shock. "Hey. Wait. Goodbye." I slammed the door shut. I threw the heavy latch. I spun the locking wheel. It sealed airtight. I leaned my forehead against the cold steel. I could hear him pounding on the other side. It sounded dull and distant. The insulation was thick. "You have enough food in there to last a month, son, but you only have enough air for 6 hours. I suggest you stop screaming and start conserving oxygen." I turned around. The kitchen was empty except for Caleb. He was huddled under the island counter. He was shaking so hard his teeth were chattering. He had seen his entire security team dismantled in less than 5 minutes. He had seen the lights go out. He had heard the bones break. He had seen the door close on his last hope. I walked over to the drawer where I kept the candles. I took one out. I lit it with my Zippo. The small flame illuminated my face. I looked like a demon rising from the pit. I walked over to the island. I placed the candle on the counter above Caleb's head. "Hello, Caleb." He looked up. His face was a mask of snot and tears. "Please, Frank, I will give you the money back. I will fix the debt. Just let me go." I looked down at him. I felt nothing. No anger, no pity, just the cold calculation of a job that was not quite finished. "You cannot fix the debt, Caleb. The debt is not money anymore. The debt is pain, and you are overdrawn." I crouched down so I was eye level with him. "Your friends are gone. One has a broken leg, the other is cooling off in the freezer. It is just you and me now, and the house." I stood up. I offered him a hand. "Come on, get up. We have one more stop on the tour." He stared at my hand. He was terrified to touch me. Where are we going?" I smiled. "We are going to the attic, Caleb. We are going to see Zoe. She has been waiting for you, and I think she is ready to have a word with her husband." He hesitated. "Get up!" I roared the command. He scrambled to his feet. He almost fell. He was pathetic. I pushed him toward the stairs. "Walk, and do not trip. I would hate for you to have an accident before we get to the top." We walked into the darkness of the hallway. I guided him with the barrel of the shotgun pressed gently against his spine. We walked past the groaning thug in the foyer. Caleb tried to look away, but I forced him to look. "Look at him, Caleb. That is your doing. You bought that pain." We started up the stairs. The shadows danced on the walls. The house creaked. It sounded like it was applauding. I nudged Caleb up the last step of the attic stairs with the barrel of the shotgun. He was weeping softly, but I tuned him out. My attention was split. Half of my mind was on the prisoner in front of me, and the other half was focused on the small screen strapped to my wrist. It was a tactical monitor linked to the bunker security feed. I needed to know what was happening in the garage. Esther was on the move. While I was dismantling her security team in the main house, she had not been idle. She had realized that the house was a trap. She had realized that Caleb was incompetent. And like a rat sensing the water rising on a sinking ship, she was looking for high ground. She knew I spent hours in the garage. She knew I had a workshop there. She did not know about the bunker specifically, but she knew there were places in that garage where I kept things safe. I stopped on the landing. I forced Caleb to his knees. "Stay here. Do not move." I looked at the wrist monitor. The green glow of the night vision camera showed Esther stumbling into the garage. She was wearing her expensive silk robe and slippers. It was freezing in there. The concrete floor was like a slab of ice, but she did not seem to feel the cold. She was driven by a desperate instinct. She needed a hostage. She knew Mia was not in the house. She knew I had taken her somewhere. She moved between the rows of tool chests. She knocked over a stack of paint cans. Clatter. Bang. She did not care. She was looking for a door. She was looking for a seam in the wall. She was clawing at the shelves. "Mia! Mia, are you in here?" Her voice came through my earpiece. It was high and thin. It was the voice of a woman who was used to getting what she wanted by snapping her fingers. But there was no one to serve her now. I watched her find the false wall behind the air compressor. She did not know the code, but she could hear the hum of the ventilation system. She pressed her ear against the metal panel. She could hear the faint sound of the heater running inside. She knew someone was in there. "Mia, it is Grandma. Open the door, honey. It is so cold out here." Out. I tightened my grip on the shotgun. This was the moment I had feared. Mia was 7 years old. She loved her grandmother. Or at least she loved the version of her grandmother that bought her dolls and candy. She did not know the version that dug graves in the snow. If Mia opened that door, Esther would grab her. She would use her own granddaughter as a human shield to bargain for her life. I wanted to run down there. I wanted to stop it. But I was 3 floors up. I had to trust the training. I had to trust that the 7 years I spent teaching Mia about right and wrong had built a foundation stronger than Esther's lies. Esther pounded on the metal. "Mia, I know you are in there. Grandpa is having an episode. He is sick, honey. He hurt Daddy. He hurt Mr. Sterling. You have to let Grandma in so we can call the police. We have to help Grandpa." It was a masterclass in manipulation. She turned the victim into the villain. She used Mia's love for me as a weapon against me. She sounded so sincere. She sounded so worried. If I did not know she had planned my murder, I might have believed her myself. I watched the monitor. Inside the bunker, Mia was sitting on the cot. She was wrapped in the wool blanket. She was holding a stuffed bear. She looked at the door. Her eyes were wide. She was trembling. She stood up. She took a step toward the door. My heart stopped. "Do not do it, Mia. Do not open it." Esther heard the movement. She pressed closer to the door. Her voice turned to syrup. "That is it, sweetie. Come to the door. There is a green button. Just press the green button. Grandma has cookies upstairs. We can watch cartoons. Just you and me." Mia reached out her hand. She touched the cold steel of the door. She was inches away from the release mechanism. Esther was smiling now. I could see it on the camera. It was a predatory smile. She thought she had won. She thought she had outsmarted the old man again. She was already planning her exit. She would grab Mia, she would take my truck, she would leave Caleb and me to kill each other, and she would be halfway to the airport before the police arrived. But Mia stopped. She did not press the button. She leaned forward. She put her mouth close to the steel seam of the door. "Esther, are you there?" She did not call her Grandma. She called her Esther. Esther blinked. She looked confused. "Yes, honey. It is Grandma. Open the door." Mia's voice came through clear and steady. It was not the voice of a child. It was the voice of a judge delivering a verdict. "Grandpa told me about the wolves." "What? What are you talking about, Mia? Open the door right now. Grandpa said that wolves sometimes wear sheep's clothes. He said they knock on the door and ask to come in, but you can see their teeth if you look close." Esther's smile vanished. She pounded the door harder. "Stop this nonsense, Mia. Open this door immediately. I am your grandmother. I command you." "No." The word hung in the air. It was a small word, but it carried the weight of a mountain. You are not my grandma. My grandma makes cookies. My grandma reads me stories. You are the lady who watched Daddy dig the hole. Esther froze. She stepped back as if the door had burned her. I saw you, Esther. I was in the yard. I saw you drinking wine in the kitchen window. You watched Daddy digging. You laughed. I felt a surge of pride so strong it almost brought me to my knees. She had seen, she had processed, and she had made her choice. She chose the truth. Esther tried one last time. Desperation crept into her voice. She started to cry, but they were fake tears. I knew the difference. Mia, please, you do not understand. We were planting a tree. It was a surprise. We do not plant trees at 2 a.m, Esther, and we do not plant trees that are 6 feet deep. Mia's logic was bulletproof. It was the logic of innocence that sees the world in black and white before adults teach them to see the gray. Go away, Esther. I am waiting for Grandpa. He is the only one with the key. Mia walked back to the cot. She sat down. She picked up her book. She turned the page. She dismissed her grandmother completely. Outside the bunker, Esther stared at the metal wall. The silence from inside was absolute. She realized that the door was not just locked. It was sealed by something stronger than steel. It was sealed by her own betrayal. She slumped against the doorframe. Her expensive robe was dragging in the oil stains on the floor. Her hair was a mess. The facade of the wealthy matriarch crumbled. She slid down until she was sitting on the cold concrete. I watched her on the screen. I looked for a shred of remorse. I looked for a sign that she regretted what she had done to our family. But I did not see regret. I saw defeat. There is a difference. Regret is wishing you had not done the bad thing. Defeat is just being sad that you got caught. She put her head in her hands. She began to sob. This time the tears were real. But she was not crying for Mia. She was not crying for me. She was crying because her trip to Paris was canceled. She was crying because the penthouse in Miami was gone. She was crying because she was 65 years old and she was sitting on a garage floor in the middle of the night with nothing but her greed to keep her warm. She looked around the garage. She saw my tools hanging on the wall. The hammer, the saw, the wrench. Tools I had used to build the life she had just tried to destroy. She picked up a screwdriver lying on the floor. For a second I thought she might try to attack the door again, but she just held it. She looked at it like it was an alien object. She had never built anything in her life. She only knew how to consume. And now there was nothing left to consume. She curled up on the floor. She pulled her knees to her chest. She looked small and broken. The woman who had ruled my house with an iron fist for 40 years was reduced to a heap of silk and misery. I touched the earpiece. Mia, can you hear me? Yes, Grandpa. You did good, baby girl. You did real good. Put your headphones on now. Put on your music. I do not want you to hear what happens next. Okay, Grandpa. I love you. I love you too. I turned off the audio feed. I could not afford to be distracted by love anymore. I had one last piece of trash to take out. I looked down at Caleb. He was still kneeling on the attic landing. He had his eyes closed. He was praying. I wondered who he was praying to. Probably the God of second chances. But that God was not listening tonight. I nudged him with his foot. Get up, Caleb. Your mother-in-law has resigned from the board. It is just you and me now. He opened his eyes. He looked at the gun. Where are we going, Frank? We are going to the roof. The roof. Why? Because I want you to see the view. I want you to see exactly what you are losing. And then I want you to tell me exactly where the money went. Every single cent. He stood up shakily. We climbed the last ladder to the roof access hatch. The wind was howling outside. It was a blizzard now. Perfect weather for a confession. I watched the final collapse of a human soul from the shadows of the second-floor landing. Caleb had fled the roof. The cold wind and the height had broken what little resolve he had left. But instead of surrendering, he did what wounded animals always do. He turned rabid. He ran back into the house not to hide, but to destroy. He scrambled up the stairs to the soundproof room where Zoe was still imprisoned. I heard the door crash open. I heard a scream that was cut short. Then came the sound of a struggle, a chair being overturned, heavy footsteps dragging something dead weight across the floor. He appeared at the top of the stairs. He was dragging Zoe by her hair. Her hands were still bound. Her ankles were still taped. She was trying to walk, but she stumbled and fell. He yanked her up violently. He held a kitchen knife to her throat. It was a 10-inch chef knife he must have grabbed from the kitchen counter when I let him back in. "Come out, Frank." His voice was shredded raw. It echoed off the vaulted ceilings of the foyer. "I know you are here. I know you can hear me. Look at her, Frank. Look at your daughter." I stayed hidden in the alcove near the library. I held my breath. I needed to gauge his state of mind. There are two types of hostage takers. The first type uses the hostage as a shield to negotiate an escape. The second type uses the hostage as a final act of spite because they know there is no escape. Caleb was the second type. His eyes were wide and unblinking. Saliva gathered at the corners of his mouth. He was vibrating with adrenaline. He dragged Zoe down the main staircase. Her heels caught on the steps. She was crying, but she was trying to be brave. She looked into the darkness of the house, searching for me. "Dad, do not come out. He will kill you. Shut up." Caleb pressed the blade harder against her skin. A thin line of red appeared on her neck. My hand tightened on the railing until the wood groaned. I calculated the distance. 30 feet. Too far to rush him without risking her life. I had to let him play his hand. He reached the bottom of the stairs. He spun around in the center of the living room. He was surrounded by the dark luxury he had coveted for so long. The leather sofas, the Persian rugs, the grand piano. Now they were just obstacles in his cage. "Where are you, old man? Are you watching? Are you enjoying this?" He looked at the security cameras. He realized I was not just a voice in the wall. I was a presence. "You want the house, Frank. You want your precious land. You want to save your legacy." He laughed. It was a jagged, hysterical sound. "Well, you can have it, but you are going to inherit a pile of ash." He let go of Zoe for a split second. He shoved her onto the sofa. She curled up, pulling her knees to her chest. Caleb ran to the utility closet under the stairs. He kicked the door in. He grabbed the 2 red jerry cans I kept there for the emergency generator. 5 gallons of high-octane gasoline in each. He uncapped the first one. The smell of fuel hit me instantly. It was sharp and chemical. It cut through the smell of fear and sweat. He began to splash the gasoline everywhere. He threw it on the curtains. He threw it on the antique armchair. He threw it on the hardwood floors I had sanded and stained with my own hands 40 years ago. Glug, glug, glug. The sound was sickening. It was the sound of a heartbeat bleeding out. He spun in circles, spraying the fuel like holy water. He was baptizing my home in destruction. If I cannot have it, nobody can. "Do you hear me, Frank? I will burn it all down. I will burn the deed. I will burn the trust. I will burn the history." He splashed gasoline on the piano. The liquid pooled on the black lacquer. He turned toward Zoe. She screamed and scrambled backward, pressing herself into the cushions. "No, Caleb, please." He splashed the remaining fuel at her feet. The fumes rose up, engulfing her. She coughed and gagged. "You too, Zoe. You are part of him. You are part of the rot. We all go together. A family barbecue." He threw the empty can across the room. It clattered against the fireplace. He opened the second can. He was crying now, big heaving sobs that shook his entire body. "Why did you make me do this, Frank? Why couldn't you just die? Why did you have to fight back? It was supposed to be easy." He poured the gasoline over his own head. It soaked his cashmere sweater. It matted his hair. It ran down his face, mixing with his tears. He was a walking torch. He was ready to ignite. He reached into his pocket. He pulled out a lighter. It was not my Zippo. It was a cheap plastic lighter he must have had on him. He held it up. His thumb hovered over the flint wheel. "Come out, Frank. Come out and watch us burn, or stay hidden and burn with us. I am counting to 3. 1. I stepped out of the shadows. I did not run. I did not shout. I walked into the circle of light cast by the moonlight streaming through the bay window. I moved with the heavy, deliberate gait of a man who has walked through storms that would tear a lesser man apart. "I am here, Caleb." He spun toward me. He held the lighter out like a grenade. He grabbed Zoe by the arm and pulled her up. He pressed the knife back to her throat. The gasoline fumes were dizzying. The air shimmered with explosive potential. "Stay back. Stay right there." I stopped. I stood 10 feet away from him. I looked at him. I did not look at the knife. I did not look at Zoe. I looked directly into his eyes. "Put the lighter down, Caleb. No. You lost Frank. You think you are smart. You think you are a tough guy. But fire beats everything. Fire cleans everything. He flicked the lighter. Sparks flew. But the flame did not catch. His hands were wet with gasoline. The flint was slick. He cursed. He wiped his thumb on his pants. He tried again. Click. A small flame erupted. It danced on the tip of the plastic. It was a tiny yellow eye looking for something to eat. Zoe screamed. She tried to pull away. Hold still. Caleb roared. He brought the flame inches closer to his own gasoline-soaked sleeve. One step, Frank. Take one step and I drop it. We all die. I stood perfectly still. My hands hung loosely at my sides. I was unarmed. I had left the shotgun in the hallway. I had left the baton on the floor. I brought nothing to this fight but myself. You are right, Caleb. Fire cleans everything. It burns away the rot. It leaves only the stone. I took a slow breath. I smelled the death in the air. But you are forgetting something. To burn a house, you need 3 things. You need fuel, you need heat, and you need oxygen. I took a step forward. Just 1 inch. Caleb flinched. He waved the lighter. Stop. I said stop. I did not stop. I took another step. You have the fuel, Caleb. You have the heat. I looked up at the ceiling. I looked at the vents I had installed. I looked at the fire suppression sensors blinking silently in the corners. But you are standing in a house built by a logistics manager. I control the flow. I control the environment. I took another step. I was 5 feet away now. I could see the madness swirling in his irises. Do it, Frank. I will drop it. I swear. Then do it. I said it softly. It was a dare. It was a command. Drop it, Caleb. End it. Show me that you have the courage to destroy yourself. Because that is all you have left. You have no money. You have no wife. You have no future. The only thing you have is that tiny little flame. He stared at me. He trembled. He wanted to do it. He wanted to end the pain. But the survival instinct is a powerful thing. It fought against his madness. He looked at the flame. He looked at the gasoline on his chest. He realized that burning to death is not a quick exit. It is the most painful way to die known to man. He hesitated. That hesitation was what I was waiting for. You are a coward, Caleb. You could not dig the hole deep enough. You could not pull the trigger at dinner. And you cannot drop that lighter now. You want me to stop you. You want me to save you from yourself. I took another step. I was within reaching distance. He lunged at me. He swung the knife. It was a clumsy, desperate arc. I did not dodge. I caught his wrist. My grip was iron. I twisted his arm. The knife clattered to the floor. But he did not drop the lighter. He screamed and threw it. The lighter flew through the air in slow motion. It tumbled end over end. The small flame was still burning. It was heading straight for the pool of gasoline at Zoe's feet. Zoe screamed and covered her face. I did not lunge for the lighter. I did not try to catch it. I knew physics. I knew trajectory. I lunged for Zoe. I tackled her. I threw my body over hers. I shielded her from the blast zone. The lighter hit the floor. Whoosh! The sound was like a jet engine igniting. The gasoline caught. A wall of fire erupted in the living room. The heat was instantaneous and brutal. It seared the hair on my arms. It sucked the air out of the room. The fire raced across the floor, following the trails of fuel Caleb had splashed. It climbed the curtains. It licked the ceiling. I rolled Zoe away from the flames. I patted out the sparks on her sweater. Go. Run to the kitchen. Get out. Dad. No. Go. I pushed her toward the hallway. She scrambled to her feet and ran. I turned back to the fire. Caleb was standing on the other side of the wall of flames. He was trapped between the inferno and the bay window. He was screaming. The fire was closing in on him. His sweater was smoking. Frank, help me. He reached out his hand through the flames. I looked at him. I looked at the fire consuming the house I had built. The house where I raised my daughter. The house where I thought I would grow old. It was all burning. And in the center of it was the man who lit the match. I stood up. I felt the heat blistering my skin. I told you, Caleb. I control the oxygen. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the remote control for the smart home system. The plastic was warm in my hand. I looked at Caleb one last time. Goodbye, son. I pressed the blue button. The emergency fire suppression system kicked in. But not the water sprinklers. I had replaced those years ago with a halon gas system for the server room and the library. It was designed to starve a fire of oxygen instantly. But there was a catch. Halon gas displaces oxygen. It puts out the fire, but if you are standing in the room and you do not have a mask, you cannot breathe. The vents opened with a hiss. A thick white fog descended from the ceiling. It hit the fire like a hammer. The flames fought back, but they were suffocating. They flickered and died. But Caleb was screaming for air. He clawed at his throat. He fell to his knees. He was gasping like a fish on a deck. I held my breath. I walked backward toward the kitchen. I watched him fall. I watched him writhe on the floor. I watched the smoke and the gas swallow him up. He wanted to take my breath away. He wanted to bury me. Now he was drowning in the air itself. I turned and walked into the kitchen. I closed the door behind me, sealing the living room. I took a deep breath of clean air. It was over. The house was saved. But the vermin had been exterminated. The kitchen door clicked shut behind me. I stood in the safety of the hallway for a second. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the cool, clean air that was circulating through the service vents. I held it. I knew my lung capacity. I spent 20 years diving for abalone off the coast during the summers. I could hold my breath for 3 minutes if I remained calm. And I was very calm. I turned back to the living room door. Through the glass pane, I saw the scene unfolding like a silent movie. The fire suppression system I had activated was not a standard water sprinkler. Water ruins hardwood floors. Water destroys electronics. Water creates a mess. I am a logistics man. I prefer clean solutions. The system I installed was a halon gas displacer. It is the same system they use in server farms and bank vaults. It does not fight fire with water. It fights fire with starvation. Caleb stood in the center of the room. He was surrounded by puddles of gasoline. He was soaked in it. He looked like a demon rising from a pit of oil. He held the cheap plastic lighter in his hand. He was screaming something, but the sound was muffled by the thick glass of the door. He was trying to ignite his own funeral pyre. He wanted to go out in a blaze of glory. He wanted to take the house and the history and the evidence with him. He flicked the lighter. I watched the small wheel spin. I saw the spark. It was bright yellow against the gloom of the room. It jumped from the flint to the nozzle. It met the butane gas. A small flame erupted. It was a weak blue light. Caleb smiled. It was the smile of a madman who finally got what he wanted. He lowered the flame toward his chest. He lowered it toward the gasoline-soaked wool of his sweater. He waited for the heat. He waited for the explosion. He waited for the end. But the end did not come. The flame flickered. It turned orange. Then it detached itself from the lighter. It floated in the air for a fraction of a second like a dying firefly. And then it vanished. Caleb blinked. He looked at the lighter. He shook it. He thought it was broken. He flicked it again. Spark. Flame. Death. The fire refused to hold. It refused to spread. He lowered the lighter all the way to the puddle of gasoline on the floor. He touched the liquid with the spark. Nothing happened. The gasoline sat there inert. It was just smelly water now. Caleb began to panic. He struck the lighter again and again. Click, click, click. He was fighting the laws of physics, and he was losing. He did not understand that fire is a living thing. It needs to eat. It needs to breathe. And I had just taken away its food. He looked around the room. The white fog of the halon gas was descending from the ceiling vents. It was heavy. It was silent. It settled over the furniture like a shroud. It settled over him. He dropped the lighter. He grabbed the box of matches from the mantel. He struck one. It flared and died instantly. He struck 3 at once. They sizzled and went black. He screamed. I could see the veins in his neck bulging. He was shouting at the fire. He was commanding it to burn. He was begging it to destroy him. But the house was under my command now, and I had ordered a ceasefire. I opened the door. I stepped back into the room. I did not breathe. I kept my lips pressed tight. I walked into the chemical fog. Caleb spun around. He saw me walking through the mist. To him, I must have looked like a monster. I was unaffected by the gas. I was unaffected by the gasoline. I was walking toward him with a steady, relentless pace. He backed away. He bumped into the piano. He knocked over a vase. Why? Why won't it burn? What did you do, Frank? He gasped the words out. He sounded like he had run a marathon. He was wheezing. I stopped 5 feet from him. I needed to conserve my oxygen. I spoke in short bursts. I did not shout. I projected. Fire needs 3 things, Caleb. Fuel, heat, oxygen. Caleb clutched his chest. He coughed. It was a dry, hacking cough. He tried to inhale deep, but the air in the room was thin. It was like standing on top of Everest without a tank. I took the oxygen away. I pointed to the vents. The system pumped in halon gas. It bonds with the oxygen molecules. It drops the oxygen level in this room to 12%. Caleb's eyes widened. He looked at the air around him. He could not see the change, but he could feel it. His body was starting to react. His fingertips were tingling. His vision was tunneling. The panic of suffocation was setting in. It is a primal fear. It overrides everything else. It overrides greed. It overrides hate. Fire cannot burn at 12%, Caleb, and human beings cannot think. He dropped to his knees. He clawed at his throat. He looked at me with pleading eyes. He wanted me to turn it off. He wanted me to open a window. I cannot breathe, Frank. Help me. My head. It is spinning. I looked down at him. I felt a cold satisfaction. He had tried to strangle my family with debt. He had tried to bury me in the earth. Now he was learning what it felt like to be buried in the air. You are feeling hypoxia, Caleb. Your brain is starving. Confusion, dizziness, nausea. It is the same feeling you gave me when you told me I had to sell my home. It is the feeling of having the life sucked out of you. He tried to stand up. He stumbled. He fell against the sofa. He was losing motor control. The knife was still in his belt. He reached for it. It was instinct. He wanted to fight the thing that was killing him, but he could not fight the atmosphere. I stepped closer. I had about 60 seconds of air left in my lungs. It was enough. You wanted to burn the house down, son. But you forgot the most important rule of logistics. Never start a reaction you cannot control. I watched him struggle. He was purple in the face. He was drooling. The arrogance was gone. The sophisticated real estate broker was gone. All that was left was a frightened animal gasping for one more breath. He pulled the knife out. He held it up. The blade shook. I will cut you. I will cut the air out of you. He lunged. It was a slow motion attack. His muscles were starved of oxygen. He moved like he was underwater. I did not even have to dodge. I just stepped to the side. He fell past me. He crashed into the coffee table. He rolled over. He slashed at my legs. He caught the fabric of my trousers. He ripped the denim. But he did not break the skin. I looked at the knife. It was a 10-inch blade. It was sharp. In the hands of a desperate man, it was deadly. I could not let him keep it. Even a dying snake can bite. I stepped in. I moved into his personal space. I entered the danger zone. He tried to stab upward. He was aiming for my gut. I caught his wrist. My grip was iron. I did not use technique. I used force. I used the strength of a man who had loaded 50-pound crates onto trucks for 8 hours a day for 40 years. I squeezed. I felt the bones in his wrist grind together. He screamed. It was a weak, gurgling sound. His fingers opened. The knife fell to the floor. It landed with a dull clatter on the Persian rug. I kicked it away. It slid under the sofa. Now he was disarmed. Now he was helpless. He looked up at me. He was crying. Frank, please. I am sorry. I will fix it. Just let me breathe. I looked at his face. I saw the face of the man who married my daughter. I saw the face of the man who held my granddaughter when she was born. I saw the potential he had wasted. But I also saw the man who dug a hole in my backyard. You had your chance to fix it, Caleb. You had 3 years to fix it. You chose the shovel. I pulled my fist back. I did not punch him to hurt him. I punched him to end it. I punched him to turn off the lights. I drove my right fist into his jaw. I put my hip into it. I put my shoulder into it. I put the weight of the mortgage and the medical bills and the betrayal into it. Crack. His head snapped back. His eyes rolled up into his head. His legs gave out. He collapsed. He hit the floor like a sack of wet cement. He did not move. He did not twitch. He was out cold. I stood over him for a second. My knuckles throbbed. It was a good pain. It was the pain of a job finished. I grabbed his collar. I dragged him toward the kitchen door. He was heavy, but adrenaline made him light. I pulled him out of the gas-filled room. I pulled him into the hallway. I let go of his collar. He slumped against the wall. I stood up and took a massive breath. The fresh oxygen rushed into my blood. It made me dizzy for a second. I leaned against the doorframe. I looked down the hall. Zoe was standing in the kitchen doorway. She was holding a frying pan. She looked terrified. She looked ready to fight. Dad. She dropped the pan. She ran to me. She threw her arms around my neck. She was shaking. She smelled of gasoline and fear. I held her tight. I buried my face in her hair. It is over, Zoe. It is over. Is he dead? She looked at Caleb's motionless body. No, he is sleeping. He has a broken jaw and a hell of a headache waiting for him, but he is alive. Why, Dad? Why did you save him? I looked at Caleb. I looked at the man who tried to kill us, because if he dies, he takes the easy way out. I need him alive, Zoe. I need him to stand in front of a judge. I need him to look Mia in the eye and explain why he put her in a hole. Death is silence. I want him to speak. I want his shame to be loud. I heard sirens in the distance. They were getting louder. The police were coming. The fire department was coming. I looked at my watch. It was midnight. The deadline for the Russian loan sharks had passed. Caleb had failed everyone. He had failed the sharks. He had failed his family. He had failed himself. I walked over to the front door. I unlocked it. I opened it wide. The cold winter air rushed in. It swirled around my feet. It blew away the smell of gasoline. It blew away the smell of fear. I stood in the doorway and watched the flashing lights come up the driveway. Red and blue. Red and blue. The cavalry had arrived, but the war was already won. Officer Miller was the first one through the door. He had his weapon drawn, but he lowered it when he saw me. He knows me. We go to the same barber shop on 3rd Street. He knows I am a man who keeps his lawn cut and his taxes paid. He looked at the chaos in the living room. He saw the scorched floorboards and the overturned furniture. He saw Caleb slumped against the wall with a broken jaw and zip ties around his wrists. He saw the knife under the sofa. I did not have to say a word. The digital file I had sent to the dispatch center 10 minutes ago had told them everything. They had heard the threats. They had heard the confession. They had heard the sound of a man trying to burn his own family alive. Miller signaled his partner. They moved on Caleb. Caleb was waking up now. The pain in his jaw was setting in. He tried to speak, but his mouth was wired shut by swelling. He made a low moaning sound like a wounded animal. They hauled him up. He could not stand on his own. His legs were jelly from the hypoxia and the fear. They dragged him out into the snow. As he passed me, he looked up. His eyes were swollen shut, but I knew he could see me. I wanted him to see me. I wanted the last thing he saw as a free man to be the face of the father he failed to kill. Sterling, the lawyer, tried to run. He had been hiding in the dining room the whole time. He tried to slip out the back door when the police entered, but Officer Miller had a K9 unit waiting in the backyard. Sterling walked out and met a German shepherd named Duke. Duke convinced him to lie down in the snow very quickly. When they brought him in, Sterling was shaking. He started shouting about attorney-client privilege. He shouted that he was a victim. He shouted that Caleb forced him. I walked over to him. I leaned in close. "Save your breath, counselor. You are going to need it to explain why your notary stamp is on a fraudulent deed, and why your fingerprints are on the gun Caleb left on the dinner table." They cuffed him and marched him out. The house was finally clearing out. The toxic elements were being removed one by one. The paramedics checked Zoe. She was shaken and bruised, but she was whole. She sat on the kitchen stool holding a cup of water. She watched the police work. She looked at me with awe. She had never seen this side of her father. She had only known the man who drove trucks and fixed toasters. She did not know the man who could turn a house into a fortress. But there was one person left. I asked Officer Miller to give me 5 minutes. He nodded. He took his men outside to process the scene. I walked to the garage. I opened the door. Esther was still sitting on the concrete floor. She had heard the sirens. She had heard the commotion. She knew it was over. When I opened the door, she looked up. Her mascara was running down her face in black streaks. She looked like a tragic opera singer after the final curtain. She stood up slowly. She smoothed her silk robe. She tried to summon some dignity. She tried to find the woman who used to order me around. "Frank, thank God. Is he gone? Did they take Caleb?" She tried to walk past me into the house. She wanted to go back to her warm bedroom. She wanted to pretend she was a victim too. I stepped in her way. I blocked the door. "You are not going in there, Esther." She stopped. She blinked. "What do you mean?" "I need to get dressed. I need to call my sister. I need to rest. This has been a nightmare." "It has been a nightmare, Esther. But you were not the dreamer. You were the architect." I reached behind the door. I pulled out a suitcase. It was a small brown suitcase. It was cheap. It was made of faux leather. It was the same suitcase she had when I met her 40 years ago at a bus stop in Chicago. She had nothing then. She was a waitress running away from a bad debt. I took her in. I gave her a home. I gave her a life. I threw the suitcase at her feet. It landed with a hollow thud. "What is this, Frank? I packed for you." She looked at the suitcase. She looked at me. "I do not understand. Where are my clothes? Where is my jewelry?" I shook my head. "Your jewelry stays. I bought it. Your clothes stay. I paid for them. Your car keys stay. The title is in my name." I pointed at the suitcase. Inside that bag is exactly what you brought into this marriage. 2 sweaters, 3 pairs of jeans, some underwear, and a pair of comfortable walking shoes. Frank, you cannot be serious. This is my house. I am your wife. You were my wife until you watched a man dig a grave for me and decided to pour yourself a glass of wine. I stepped closer. My voice dropped to a whisper. It was cold. It was final. I spoke to Officer Miller. I told him I did not want to press charges against you. Her face lit up with hope. She thought I was forgiving her. She thought she had wiggled out of the trap. Oh, Frank, thank you. I knew you still loved me. I was scared. Caleb forced me. I held up a hand. Stop. I did not spare you because I love you. I spared you because prison is too easy. In prison, you get 3 meals a day. You get a bed. You get friends to complain to. You get attention. I looked around the garage. I want something different for you, Esther. I want you to be invisible. I want you to walk out of here with nothing. No money, no credit cards, no friends. I canceled your cards an hour ago. I changed the locks on the accounts. You are 65 years old and you are starting over from 0. Frank, please. Where will I go? I do not know, Esther. Maybe you can go to Paris. I hear the bridges are nice to sleep under this time of year. I opened the garage door. The wind howled in. The snow was falling harder. Go. She looked at the dark driveway. She looked at the warm house behind me. She realized I was serious. She realized that the man who had been her safety net for 4 decades had just cut the rope. She picked up the suitcase. She looked at me one last time. She opened her mouth to speak, but she saw my eyes. There was nothing there for her. No anger, no love, just a vacancy sign. She turned and walked out into the snow. She was wearing slippers. She was shivering. She looked small and gray against the white storm. I watched her walk down the driveway until she disappeared into the darkness. She was gone. I closed the garage door. I locked it. I went back inside. The house was quiet. The police were gone. Zoe was asleep on the sofa in the den. I went down to the bunker. I woke up Mia. She rubbed her eyes. Is the bad man gone, Grandpa? Yes, baby. The bad man is gone. And the bad lady, too. I carried her upstairs. I put her in my bed. I sat in the chair and watched them sleep until the sun came up. The next morning, the sky was clear. The storm had passed. The snow was blindingly white. It covered everything. It covered the footprints. It covered the tire tracks. It made the world look new. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where 24 hours ago Caleb had pointed a gun at me. Zoe walked in. She looked better. She had showered. She looked like herself again. Dad. I have been thinking. She sat down. She wrapped her hands around the mug. About the trust, the charity. Did you really give it all away? I looked at her. I smiled. It was a genuine smile. I took a sip of coffee. Zoe, I am a logistics manager. I never move cargo without a destination. And I never give away assets without a return on investment. She looked confused. So you lied. I nodded. I bluffed. There is no trust. There is no charity board. The land is still mine. She sighed with relief. Thank God. So we can keep the house. I shook my head. No, we are not keeping the house. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a contract, but not the one Caleb wanted me to sign. I called Mr. Henderson this morning. You remember him. Caleb's biggest rival in the real estate market. The guy Caleb hated because he always outbid him. Zoe nodded. I sold the land to Henderson. I signed the electronic deal 10 minutes ago. Zoe's jaw dropped. You sold it. For how much? I leaned back. Henderson has been trying to buy this plot for 5 years. He wants to build a luxury eco-resort. I told him he could have it today if he paid cash and if he paid double the market value. He agreed. I slid the paper across the table. Zoe looked at the number. Her eyes widened. $15 million. Plus he covers the closing costs. And he promised to bulldoze this house to the ground. Bulldoze it. But Dad, you built this house. I looked around the kitchen. I looked at the spot where Caleb stood. I looked at the spot where Esther stood. This house is poisoned, Zoe. The wood remembers, the walls remember. I cannot live here. You cannot live here. We need fresh dirt. I stood up. Pack your bags. We are leaving in an hour. Where are we going? Texas. I bought a ranch outside of Austin, 300 acres. Horses, sunshine, and no snow. We packed the truck. We took only what mattered: photos, clothes, Mia's toys. I left the furniture. I left the appliances. I left the ghosts. Before we left, I walked out to the backyard one last time. The sun was shining on the spot under the oak tree. The dirt was still disturbed where Caleb had dug. I had a shovel in my hand, but I was not digging. I was filling. I shoveled the snow and the dirt back into the hole properly. I packed it down. I made it level. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out my wedding ring. It was a simple gold band. I had worn it for 40 years. It had shaped my finger. There was a groove in my skin where it sat. I looked at it. I thought about the woman who put it there. I thought about the lies. I dropped the ring onto the dirt. I shoveled a mound of heavy clay over it. I stomped it down with my boot. Goodbye, Esther. I walked back to the truck. Zoe and Mia were in the front seat. The engine was running. The heater was on. I climbed in. I put the truck in gear. "Grandpa, where are we going?" Mia asked from the middle seat. "We are going home, baby. The real one." I drove down the driveway. I did not look in the rearview mirror. A logistics man never looks back at the shipment he just delivered. He only looks at the road ahead. I turned onto the main road. The sun was bright. The road was clear. If you ever find yourself digging a hole for someone else, make sure you dig two, because the first one might not be deep enough to hold your own secrets. My name is Franklin Jefferson, and this is how I cleaned house. If you enjoyed this story, let me know in the comments which part was your favorite. And do not forget to subscribe for more stories from the dark side of the American dream. Until next time, keep your shovel clean and your eyes open. I spent my life moving cargo from point A to point B, believing that if you secure the load, it arrives safely. I applied that same logic to my family, thinking my hard work secured their love. I was wrong. The most dangerous cargo isn't what you carry, it's what you bury. I learned that silence isn't peace. Sometimes it's just the sound of someone digging your grave. Family isn't defined by whose blood runs in your veins, but by who is willing to bleed for you. If you have to buy their loyalty with land and silence, you've already been sold out. Trust but verify, and always keep your shovel ready not to dig holes for others, but to fill the ones they dig for you. If you believe that betrayal should never go unpunished, hit that like button. Have you ever had a Caleb in your life, someone who smiled at your face while sharpening a knife behind your back? Tell me your story in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you want to hear more stories about justice served cold, subscribe and turn on notifications. I'll see you in the next one.